Chapter 1420. You may not believe it, but the African baby finally became popular and transmigrated. The original poster posted a screenshot on the first floor. There was a line of golden words on it. Congratulations to the viewer Yi Wu Yenling for winning the first Dream of 1,000 Years event. The post sank as soon as it was posted. Not long after, it was scooped up by countless salted fish and quickly became a popular post. Comment 33, F***CK. I found a shameful lucky emperor. The content of the post makes people feel uncomfortable. Comment 108. I never expected that a group of ancient big shots would be defeated by a green-skinned guy from the forum. The forum was called the Empress Streaming Forum. One look at the name and you knew it was a forum for the live stream. The members were very active. The ancient big shot, Tudu Faccio, was the founder of the forum and the editor of the related magazine. The members who stayed in the forum for years were mostly at the yellow underwear level. The green-skinned guy was a newcomer. Who wouldn't be jealous? They were loyal to the streamer. Why didn't such a good thing happen to them but to a green-skinned guy? Comment 999. OP open the door. I'm going to hack you to death. Comment 1008. Sob, I thought it was photoshopped. I didn't expect it to be real. The probability was 1 in 5 million. With such good luck, why didn't you buy a lottery ticket? Why are you fighting for a slot in the live stream? I was so angry that my heart ached. I was jealous. Comment 2035. I'll sharpen my knife in secret. When I'm done I'll hack you to death. Comment 4088. I'm waiting for the OP to transmigrate and fail. Comment 5555. It's our red team who got the first blood. If the next dimension got the slot, wouldn't we vomit? The OP helped me send a message to the streamer. I've washed up, stripped, and waited for her on the bed. Why isn't she here yet? It's already 520. Most people were envious, jealous, and hateful. A small number of people treated the OP like a koi fish and wished they could repost it every day. The OP, everyone is so passionate. I'll cherish the opportunity to touch the streamer's hand. I'll tell you how it feels when I come back. After attracting a wave of hatred, the OP quickly went offline. Not long after, the 5 million salted fish saw a small screen appear in Jiang Pingji's livestream. They clicked on it and saw an unfamiliar livestream. The streaming room was attached to Jiang Pingji's room, so they could watch it on the same screen. Jiang Pingji clicked on it too. Oh my god, I actually transmigrated. In the picture, the woman with a delicate and classic appearance widened her eyes in shock. She raised her hands and turned them over and over. The woman's hair was combed into a woman's bun. She was supposed to be gentle and virtuous, but she made an action that was completely inconsistent with her temperament and appearance. She gently pinched her face and couldn't help but let out a cry of pain and let go. I just fell asleep on my bed and as soon as I opened my eyes I ran here. I'm shivering. Host, where are you? The woman looked at the screen of the live stream with tears in her eyes and could not help but cry for help. Although it was only a 12-hour experience, she was shocked and scared to suddenly appear in an unfamiliar environment. The group of salted fishes fell silent. Jiang Pingji coughed softly and immediately sent a bullet screen to her. Host V, don't panic. Look around and see if there's anything to prove your identity. Oh, got it. The woman was not used to the clothes on her body and almost stepped on the hem of her skirt. Fortunately, there was no one around to see her embarrassment. She quickly moved to the bronze mirror on the dressing table and tried hard to stretch her face in front of it. She looked left and right and murmured, I'm sure it's a soul transmigration. There were some bamboo slips on the table in the room. She tried hard to identify them. She stared until her eyes were sore and barely recognized what was written on them. Guang? This name is quite masculine. Is this body called Zong Guang? She flipped through the other slips. Some were Shanju Sanren, some were Zong Guang, and some were Do Xianren. So, what is this body called? While she was puzzled, the door of the bedroom was gently opened. A woman dressed as a maid bowed gently and said, My lady, there's a distinguished guest at home. The woman had her back facing the maid, so the maid could not see the stiff expression on her face. Dumbstruck, crazy screamed JPG. Who could tell her what to do next? Help. When the salted fishes saw her reaction, they all convulsed with laughter. This reaction was too funny. Perhaps the heavens heard the woman's voice. A prompt appeared at the bottom of the streaming screen. System prompt, please report to the master. I'll go over now. The woman forced herself to stay calm. Her voice was stiff as she imitated the system prompt and replied to the maid. The maid was surprised but did not think too much. The lady had caught a cold a while ago and only got better after half a month. It was normal for her voice to be stiff. After sending the maid away, the woman suddenly heaved a sigh of relief. She collapsed on the ground like a dehydrated salted fish. She muttered to the streaming screen, "SOS." Based on the current situation, this body did not seem to belong to a commoner. What posture should she use to not expose herself? Speaking of which, will the baby not last 12 hours before being eliminated as a demon? The salted fishes laughed after hearing that. 12 hours? Can't you be a little more ambitious? The woman looked dispirited. She took a deep breath and the scenes and images of Jiang Pingji streaming appeared in her mind. She secretly encouraged herself. Don't be afraid, don't be afraid. You have a solid backing of 5 million and the streamer behind you. It turned out that the woman's worries were unnecessary. She was here to experience it. It was not like she could not really go back. The system would naturally open the door for her. This family's surname was Dou. This was the territory of Yangshan in Shangyang County. The woman blinked her eyes after hearing that. As one of the fans of the streaming room, she naturally knew the latest developments in the streaming room. The surname Dou in Yangshan in Shangyang County? Could it be that this family is the talented farmer that the streamer is looking for? The woman muttered to herself. On the surface, she ordered the servants to prepare to receive the guest according to the system's prompt. The maids did not suspect anything. Instead, they felt that the lady was exceptionally straightforward that day. The only thing that was awkward was, she seemed to be suffering from an eye disease. Her eyes could not help but stare at a certain place. It looked strange and scary. There was a distinguished guest at the door today. The guest was the well-known former head of the Feng family, Feng Ren, one of the famous scholars. Others did not know why Feng Ren was there, but the woman knew that he was there on behalf of Jiang Pingji to recruit Dou Shi. Thinking of this, the woman suddenly recalled, isn't Zhong Guang Dou Shi's courtesy name? This body is most likely Dou Shi's wife? She muttered to herself. She followed the system's prompt and turned left and right. When she reached the outside of the main hall, she heard Feng Ren's voice. System, please pay attention to the prompt. Do not do anything that will ruin the character's design, so as not to cause trouble to the original owner. The woman nodded quickly. She quickly reacted and stopped what she was doing. Others could not see the streaming room screen and the system's prompt. Her action looked like she was possessed. I really don't know how the streamer can ignore the streaming room for 10 years and not be affected by the bullet screen. The bullet screen was full of obscene words and jokes. She held it in until her cheeks hurt. As she muttered, she realized that the two people in the hall who were chatting were looking at her. The woman was speechless. Oh my. Chapter 1421. As a loyal audience in the streaming room, the woman occasionally daydreamed about transmigration. If she was lucky enough to transmigrate, what would she do? Would she go with the flow and be a reserved and noble lady of an aristocratic family, enjoying the authentic ancient customs? Or would she rebel and release her nature to live a modern woman's style in the strict ancient times? Or would she learn martial arts from literature and imitate the streamer to be a heroine who was not inferior to any man? Would she be full of vigor and vanish into thin air while talking and laughing? However, no matter how much she imagined and daydreamed, it could not offset the embarrassment and nervousness when she was in the arena. Even if the transmigration was only for 12 hours, she did not want to lose her reputation as a Mary Sue in front of 5 million people. Kojiao Chi-fan, don't panic, lucky queen. I believe you are the fattest. Shall we Chuangduan, hypnotize yourself that you are a streamer with an aura of 2.8 meters. What are Feng Ren and Dou Shi? The woman could not help but twitch the corner of her mouth. She also wanted to calm down, but the bullet screen in the streaming room was too much of a hindrance. She could not imagine how Jiang Pingji did it. How could she completely ignore the bullet screen full of obscene jokes? I can't do it. The woman was not an actress. Her ability to control her emotions was only at an ordinary level. Although it could not be said that all her emotions were written on her face, it was not to the extent that she could not show her emotions. She was not aware of it, but others saw the subtle expressions on her face. Sadness, surprise, fear, retreat. All kinds of emotions flashed through her face. Feng Ren was speechless. This was Dou Shi's wife? Dou Shi looked at his wife with surprise and worry, but there was no reprimand or displeasure. Could be seen that Dou Shi and his wife had a very good relationship. Master Feng, this is my wife. Dou Shi smiled and went forward to hold the woman's hand. She suddenly stiffened and her fingers seemed to shrink back. Dou Shi was puzzled, but he did not let her break away. Otherwise it would be difficult to smooth things over in front of Feng Ren. My wife has admired your talent since she was still in her boudoir. Now that she heard that you are a guest in our house, I'm afraid she is overjoyed. Hearing that their idol of many years had come to visit in person, it was understandable that the fans would be too happy to do something unruly. Feng Ren said with a smile, I saw that your mansion is in good order just now. I guess it's because your wife runs the house well and takes care of things well. The woman bowed in a slightly stiff manner. Her cheeks were flushed as she said embarrassedly, I don't deserve your praise. Mr. You're too kind. From an outsider's point of view, her reaction coincided with what Doshi had just said. The awkward atmosphere was immediately alleviated. After sitting down, the woman's cheeks continued to redden, and she did not dare to raise her head to look at him for a long time. Zhang Jike's ping pong, I broke out in a cold sweat just now. After this stage, the next part should be easier, right? Tudu Feichio, your acting skills are not bad. Unbeknownst to him, the woman was already crying in her heart. She was really scared and worried. In a completely unfamiliar environment, facing a complete stranger, her heart was in her throat, but she could only brace herself and hold on. Do Shi and Feng Ren noticed the woman's uneasiness and embarrassment. Fortunately, both of them were gentlemen, and their current focus had nothing to do with her, so they did not dwell on her. Do Shi did not know Feng Ren's purpose this time, but the woman with the script knew. Feng Ren came to test Do Shi's ability. If Do Shi met the requirements, he would be promoted immediately. The woman tried her best to sit upright and secretly sighed. The feeling of watching a live broadcast and being there was really different. She came just in time, and Feng Ren and Do Shi had not even exchanged greetings. Do Shi was secretly guessing Feng Ren's purpose this time. Could it be that Feng Ren's purpose this time was related to his own future? But how could he be worthy of Feng Ren's personal visit? As far as he knew, there were a lot of talents in the Lanting General's camp. How could he be short of one person, let alone Feng Ren? While he was secretly wondering, Feng Ren, the old fox, had already begun to test him. Do Shi did not realize this, but the surrounding women were so excited that they clenched their hands on their knees, wrinkling the fabric of their clothes. The show was about to begin. May I ask, sir, why are you here? Do Shi secretly pondered, and he also had a faint expectation in his heart. He tentatively asked Feng Ren, Yang Mountain is remote. If you want to do something, it might not be convenient. As Zhongguang said, I do have some difficulties here. Feng Ren said with a smile, under the order of the Lanting General, I am supervising the construction of the branch of the Golden Scale Academy, and the location of the branch is near Yang Mountain. I'm ashamed to say that I don't know much about Yang Mountain. If I want to build a big building here, I need help from someone who knows everything. Before I left, I heard from Huijie that there was a classmate who lived in Yang Mountain for generations, and he was familiar with construction. Maybe he could help. When I came here, I asked around, and then I shamelessly came to you. Do Shi was stunned for a moment. He did not expect that Feng Ren came to him because of Feng Ju's recommendation. He said humbly, this is just a small matter. Sir, you can just send someone to inform me. Why do you need to come to my house in person? Although it was a help, it was also an excellent opportunity for Do Shi, and others could not ask for it. If it was done well, he might be able to build a relationship with the Feng family, and he would have more connections in the future. It's not just for this, Feng Ren said with a smile. Recently, I've been compiling books for children, and the content is related to the 100 Schools of Thought. The 100 Schools of Thought have a wide range of works, and even the Feng family has not collected many books. I heard from Huijie that Zhongguang is a descendant of the School of Agriculture, so you must have a lot of agricultural books in your house. I shamelessly came to your house to ask for advice from Zhongguang. It would be great if I could borrow 1 or 2 books. After listening to Feng Ren's explanation, Do Shi naturally did not doubt it anymore. Instead, he was a little fearful. For a famous scholar to ask for guidance from a nameless junior, the other party was giving him face. How could Do Shi dare to casually agree? Feng Ren used this topic to test Do Shi's depth. The Feng family had collected a lot of agricultural books, and Feng Ren had also dabbled in this area, so it was not a problem to teach him. Do Shi also completely let down his guard and told him everything he knew. As a small part of the 100 Schools of Thought, the School of Agriculture had always not been valued. It had been a long time since Do Shi talked about the School of Agriculture with someone so freely. Once he started talking, he could not stop talking. He was so immersed in it that he did not notice Feng Ren's smile getting wider. As a bystander, the woman naturally did not want to miss Feng Ren's reaction. Judging from his attitude, Feng Ren was quite satisfied with Do Shi. It seemed like there was a chance. When Do Shi's mouth was dry from talking, Feng Ren took out a roll from his sleeve and said, I came across something a while ago. This was naturally the draft that Jiang Pingji had given to Feng Ren. Doshi asked, "This is?" Feng Ren said, "Looking at the content, it seems to be closely related to the School of Agriculture." Doshi's curiosity was aroused and he boldly borrowed it from Feng Ren. He did not feel anything at first glance, but when he looked at it carefully, he felt like he had found a treasure. Feng Ren did not disturb Doshi but waited with a smile. From the corner of his eye, he saw that Doshi's wife was looking at him with a look of understanding. He had the illusion that a junior had seen through his plans. Chapter 1422. The woman saw through it but didn't say it out loud. Feng Ren had a better impression of her. On the other side, Doshi was getting more and more excited. He couldn't help but ask, "Where did you find this?" Feng Ren showed just the right amount of confusion. "Why are you so excited? Could it be that this item is a supreme treasure?" Doshi suppressed his excitement. "I don't know if it's a treasure or not, but if it's used properly, it's worth tens of thousands of gold coins." Although the draft was written carelessly, Doshi could see the value in it. Unlike the obscure and simple farming books, the content of the draft was concise and clear, almost like a vernacular. The content was also very interesting. It went from shallow to deep, progressing step by step, from a rough general category to a detailed description of each subcategory. There were also many farming plans. These plans were fresh to Doshi. This was like a key that opened the door to a new world, giving him a feeling of enlightenment. "Oh, really?" Feng Ren pretended to be surprised. Doshi suppressed his excitement and said with a smile, "If I didn't know who the author is, I would really like to visit you and have a good discussion." Feng Ren asked, "What do you mean?" Doshi said, "Dongqing is peaceful under the governance of Lord Lanting, but other places are suffering from famine. In the final analysis, it's because the good farmland produces too little food. There are many reasons for limiting the output of farmland, but the most fatal one is the fertility of farmland. The fertility of farmland was a big problem that was difficult to solve. It fundamentally restricted agricultural output. Even fertile farmland couldn't stand continuous farming. Sooner or later, it would degenerate due to the lack of fertility. For sustainable development, they could only choose to stop farming and let the fertility of the farmland recover by itself. Once they stopped farming, it meant that there would be no food production during the farming period, which undoubtedly increased the food pressure. Jiang Pingji had been fighting for years. In order to maintain the supply, she could only cultivate wasteland while farming continuously. In the long run, it was tantamount to drinking poison to quench thirst. Feng Ren nodded and said, "What do you mean?" "I don't know who wrote this book. The content is bold and novel. I've never heard of it." Doshi pointed to the draft and said, "Even if others think it's wild and unrealistic, I think this person's idea is very logical. I think it must be written by a famous farmer. This person wanted to use manpower to replenish the fertility of the farmland. His plan was clear and specific, and most of it was traceable and reasonable. Many people don't know how to use the fertilizer, but those who know how to use it don't know how much is appropriate. They don't even know how to use it to maximize the benefits of the farmland. This person is very meticulous. Not only did he think of everything, he even provided detailed steps." When he spoke up to hear, Doshi spoke with fervor and composure, and he seemed to be unable to stop. The reason why good farmland was called good farmland and had a higher output than ordinary farmland was naturally because the farmland was more fertile. If external forces were used to interfere with the fertility of the farmland could be maintained at an extremely high level of fertility without the need for plowing and fallow. Would there be any need to worry about a high harvest? The Dou family was considered a relatively large and wealthy family in Yangshan. Doshi himself was a member of a farmer's family, so he was very familiar with the process of farming. In order to increase output, he often studied in this area, and he had also summed up a set of farming experience. It was precisely because of this that the Dou family's output was much higher than that of others. However, comparing Doshi's method to the contents of the draft was like comparing a pearl to the bright moon. Looking at the contents of the draft, there should be more than this. Doshi sighed and said, "I don't know who it is, but if I'm lucky enough to meet him, I must talk to him through the night." As soon as he finished speaking, Feng Ren, Madame Dou, and the 5 million salted fish all looked at him strangely. "Talk to him through the night? Haha, in your dreams?" Tudu Feichio, Beauty Ci said that sleeping together and talking to him through the night are all benefits that belong to him. Although Feng Ren did not know the relationship between Jiang Pingji and Wei Ci, he knew that it was unlikely that a female noble would be too intimate with a subordinate of the opposite sex. Do Shi's theory was passable, but he did not know how it would turn out in practice. After all, there would always be people who said one thing and did another. Feng Ren tricked Do Shi into leaving with a few words. Seeing this, Madame Do also wanted to follow. Do Shi advised, Madam, it's very windy outside and you've just recovered from a cold. It's better for you to recuperate in the manor. The woman did not know how to respond before following him out. Feng Ren, who was at the side, helped her. Although it's important to recuperate, a proper relaxation can also help with recovery. Your wife's complexion is good, so she should be fine. Do Shi said awkwardly, my wife is a woman after all. If I go with you, I'm afraid I'll be a hindrance. Feng Ren smiled and said, it's okay. Do Shi did not know why he came, but this madam seemed to have seen through him and was watching the show from the side. One could imagine that she was also a clear-minded person. Henxing Zhao, oh my god, I don't know why, but when I see Big Boss Feng Ren smile, I feel creepy. It's more than creepy, the woman muttered to herself. When she was in front of Feng Ren, she felt that this old fox was more uneasy than she had imagined. The three of them changed into clothes that were convenient for traveling. The woman also changed into a simpler outfit and wore wooden clogs. The woman was embarrassed to find that Feng Ren and Do Shi did not make a sound when they walked, but she was the only one who made a clanking sound when she stepped on the wooden clogs. The woman was speechless. Hum hum hum, NH Carriage. Do Shi also looked at his wife in surprise and Feng Ren looked at her with a faint smile. She was so stressed. She felt that she could be exposed at any moment. I was a little sick earlier. If I've been rude, please forgive me. The system did not prompt her, so she could only rack her brain to think of a way to deal with it. Fortunately, Feng Ren was not a calculative person, so he did not criticize her. The Do family had a lot of farmland and Do Shi took care of a few acres himself. They were considered experimental fields. Because of proper care, the crops were growing well. Do Shi was not only good at theory but he was also very good at practice. He knew that the political views of the farmers were not in line with the mainstream, and he did not have any background, so officialdom was not suitable for him. Therefore, although he wanted to become an official, he also knew what he was doing. Most of his thoughts were on how to run the family business. As a rich family in Yangshan, running the farmland well was equivalent to running the family business well. Do Shi combined theory with practice, and the harvest of the farmland was very good. Even if it was a disaster year, he could still make a small sum of money. If God was kind to him, he would make a lot of money this year. It was rare to see a landlord as pure and unpretentious as him in this world. You could not see what other landlords looked like, but he had a good reputation in Yangshan. Feng Ren had never worked in the field, but he still had a theory. The woman also had the help of the salted fish in the live broadcast room, and from time to time she would say something amazing. Feng Ren praised, your wife is really not an ordinary woman. With such insight, no wonder you can be in harmony with Zhongguang. The woman smiled shyly. Chapter 1423. Feng Ren and Do Shi chatted happily as if they were old friends. The more Feng Ren knew about Do Shi, the more satisfied he was. However, he was not in a hurry to reveal the purpose of the expedition. Instead, he secretly sounded Do Shi out and wanted to know what Do Shi thought of the Duke of Lanting. No matter how great Jiang Pingji was, there were still many conservative people who did not buy into her. Do Shi did not look like a pedantic person, but it was hard to guarantee that he would not be conflicted because of Jiang Pingji's gender. There were precedents of people refusing to conquer because of their gender. I didn't expect Yang Mountain to be such a paradise. Feng Ren smiled as he took off his bamboo hat and put it in front of his chest. With one hand behind his back, he stood beside the field and looked into the distance. He said, Lanting Duke plans to build a branch here so that the children can stay away from the mortal world and focus on their studies. Do Shi smiled and said, it's a blessing for the people of Yang Mountain that the Duke of Lanting has taken pity on Yang Mountain. Even though Do Shi had lived in Yang Mountain for a long time and rarely went out, he had heard of the famous Golden Scale Academy. If the branch could be located in Yang Mountain, it would undoubtedly bring a large number of people to Yang Mountain, and the increase in population would naturally boost the local economy. Feng Ren said, oh? Zhongguang has seen through everything. There would always be people who liked to argue. Many mediocre people felt that the establishment of a branch academy was a bad thing. They felt that it was a huge construction project that wasted manpower and money. Do Shi was a commoner, but he could see through everything so clearly, which made Feng Ren like him even more. I'm just trying to show off in front of an expert. Do Shi said humbly, I don't deserve such praise. Do Shi was a wealthy landowner in Yangshan, and he was also the son of a farmer. Naturally, his eyes were closer to the common people. Of course, he knew how good it was for Yang Shan to build a branch. Even a pig could take off standing on a wind gap, not to mention a hurricane in the Golden Scale Institution. Humility is a virtue, but you can't undervalue yourself. Feng Ren said with a smile. When the matter of the school division was first announced, many people were not optimistic about it and some even slandered it. There were many famous people among them. Thinking about it, it makes me laugh. These words were indirectly praising Dou Shi for being as knowledgeable as those famous scholars. Dou Shi didn't know whether to agree or not, so he could only change the topic. Lord Lanting has the ability to rule the heavens and the earth. It's not easy for ordinary people to see through his thoughts. It wasn't that Dou Shi was talented, nor was it that the famous scholars who had misjudged him were useless. It was clear that the person in question was too scheming and too capable. The smile on Feng Ren's lips grew wider. Logically speaking, he who was born in the Confucian school was unlikely to like Dou Shi who was born in the peasant school. After all, the knowledge and political ideas of the two families were in conflict. However, this did not prevent Feng Ren from appreciating Dou Shi. There weren't many interesting young people like him anymore. From what you've said, Zhong Guang seems to hold the Duke of Lanting in high regard. Feng Ren asked with a smile, "What do you think of her?" Dou Shi shook his head and said, "A dignified marquis and a wise ruler. How can a commoner judge him?" In a few words, Feng Ren had already gotten what he wanted from Dou Shi. Dou Shi held Jiang Pingji in high esteem. If she wanted to subdue him, he would most likely not refuse. With this understanding, Feng Ren felt that he had completed most of his task. His mood was also cleared up. Madame Dou, who was following behind them, looked at Dou Shi's back and secretly gave him 2 thumbs up. This young man has a bright future. Xiao Muji, to show his loyalty in front of 5 million salted fish, this Dou Shi has a bright future. When Miao Tsang sure, isn't the point of showing his loyalty to the streamer without knowing it? For Dou Shi, no matter how many salted fish there were, they couldn't compare to the streamer alone. After all, Jiang Pingji was Dou Shi's future superior. The 3 of them left Dou Shi's experimental field and saw a group of servants from rich families waiting at the foot of the mountain. Dou Shi saw the emblem of the Feng family on the carriage and said sensibly, "Sir, you're busy. I won't bother you anymore." Feng Ren smiled and nodded. They agreed to meet next time. Madame Dou watched Feng Ren get into the carriage and put down the curtain. She was stunned for a long time. "Wait. Big boss Feng Ren, have you forgotten something? Where's the document that the streamer wrote to Dou Shi?" Although she didn't scream, her emotions were still revealed. Dou Shi saw all the changes in her expression. "Madam, what's wrong?" It was hot outside. Dou Shi held an umbrella for her. The woman came back to her senses and said embarrassedly, "I'm a little reluctant. It's rare to meet a famous scholar." Since Feng Ren was the idol that this body worshipped, it shouldn't be a problem to answer like this, right? Maybe there'll be a chance in the future. Dou Shi smiled and said, "Madam caught a cold and was very sick. You almost scared me. Now that you've recovered, I should prepare something to go to Qingxue Temple to fulfill my vow. Why don't you go back and rest first? Don't tire yourself out." Qingxue Temple? Since it's to fulfill my vow, I should be there too. Only then will I show my sincerity. The time-traveling experience only lasted for 12 hours. She wanted to see more of the real ancient times. Why would she want to waste time in the mansion? Dou Shi said, "That's good too." Seeing the interaction between the two, many salted fish were relieved. The lucky emperor had some tricks up his sleeves. Dou Shi didn't expose him. But, was that the truth? Jiang Pingji rested her chin on her hand and looked at the screen. Her eyes were deep. At that moment her private message beeped. "Yuaba, don't worry." Jiang Pingji said, "What should I worry about?" "Yuaba, aren't you worried that the so-called dream of 1,000 years will harm the people in the streaming room?" Jiang Pingji didn't even bother to lift her eyelids. She said, "Old chief, aren't you worried? The so-called system is the culprit who turned the Federation upside down and caused the 2,000 years of war. I naturally have a reason to worry that this thing will cause trouble again. Yuaba, although that person gave you the god-slaying saber with the intention of using you to solve the defected heavenly brain, it was ultimately to clean up the problems left behind by history. The other party's standpoint is the same as yours. Naturally, he won't be a burden to you." In other words, what Jiang Pingji was worried about would not happen. Jiang Pingji glanced at him. "Old chief, you really know a lot of insider information." After a while, the system notification popped up. "Your good friend Yuaba has gone offline. Jiang Pingji snorted and muttered, "Coward." When she returned to the Federation one day, she would capture all the insiders and interrogate them. When she turned her gaze back to the streaming room screen, she realized that Dou Shi and his wife had already arrived at Qingxue Temple. Qingxue Temple was a Taoist temple. Although it was an ancient building with a long history, it didn't have a lot of followers. It wasn't until a few years ago that a Jinren came to Qingxue Temple to practice on his own that the Taoist temple began to flourish. Chapter 1424. Many believers came here to ask for divination. Since the divination was so accurate, it was hard for the incense to not be popular. Immortal Liru was over 70 years old, but to outsiders he had white hair and a youthful complexion. He was hale and hearty and his steps were steady. Madame Dou had visited Taoist temples during holidays, but those temples were more like tourist attractions. Many Taoist priests were also there and they did not look like otherworldly masters at all. In contrast, the Qingxue temple was much quieter. The believers and Taoist priests who came and went were pious. She calmed down and followed Dou Shi into the Taoist temple. "What do you think of this place, madam?" The woman was slow to react. She smiled and said, "It's very good. It's not grand but the atmosphere is very comfortable." After that, she looked around curiously as if everything was new to her. Dou Shi was speechless. The two entered the main hall. The temple master Immortal Liru was also there. He was explaining the divination of a believer in a low voice. When Immortal Liru was done, Dou Shi stepped forward. After greeting each other, Dou Shi explained the purpose of his visit and asked about the requirements for the vow. Immortal Liru glanced at Madame Dou. He frowned slightly at first but then relaxed. "Your wife's complexion is excellent and her aura is strong. It seems that she has passed the hurdle and will recover in a few days." Immortal Liru summoned a Taoist boy and asked him to take Madame Dou to burn incense elsewhere. The latter could not have asked for more and walked briskly. Hearing the sound of Immortal falling on the ground gradually fade away, Dou Shi's face suddenly darkened. Immortal Liru said, "According to the divination your wife won't survive the cold. Now that the heavens have blessed her, she should be fine." "Immortal, this one is definitely not the real Zhuojing. He's not some mountain spirit or wild monster." Dou Shi said, "My wife was born in a poor and illiterate family. But this one is different. His words and actions are very different from my wife's. Immortal, do you have a way to get rid of this demon?" Dou Shi did not care about the mountain spirit or wild monster. He just wanted his wife back. According to Immortal Liru's previous assertion, his wife would not leave this world for long. But he could not tolerate a stranger occupying her body. "Don't worry, Layman Dou." Immortal Liru comforted Dou Shi. "This is your wife's fortune. It's not a bad thing." Dou Shi was surprised. "What do you mean?" "Now, this young householder is a lucky star," Perfected Liru said with a smile. "I hereby congratulate householder Dou and his wife for growing old together." Dou Shi was stunned. "Dao Master, do you mean my wife will be back soon?" Adept Lu Ru said, "If I'm not wrong, that little lucky star can only stay here for 12 hours. In any case, he could be considered as half a savior. Don't try to crush him to death so easily." Dou Shi's heart, which had been hanging in suspense, finally calmed down. Not a mountain spirit but a lucky star? He was glad that he didn't act impulsively. Otherwise things would have really gone south. Naturally, Madame Dou was unaware of the conversation between Dou Shi and enlightened Master Liru. She sent the Taoist boy away. Seeing that there was no one around, she instantly let loose her natural instincts. She wished she could kick away the wooden clogs. These things were really difficult to wear. "It smells so good." She tiptoed on one side of the courtyard wall. She could clearly smell the fragrance of flowers drifting in from outside the courtyard, but she couldn't see the scenery. Looking left and right, she saw that there was no one around. She took off the wooden clogs and climbed up the rockery. Indeed, there was a beautiful scenery outside the courtyard. These Taoist priests really know how to enjoy life. It's such a blessing to live here in retirement. It would be even better if I had a cell phone and Wi-Fi. As someone who couldn't live without a cell phone 24/7, if not for the novelty of transmigration, she really couldn't stand the time without one. In the distance, Dou Shi was speechless. She really had the temperament of a child. He waited for a while for the other party to climb down to her heart's content before calling out to her. Madame Dou didn't know what to do, but when she heard Dou Shi say that the matter was settled and they could go home, she believed him. On the way back, Dou Shi saw that she was extremely curious about the market outside, so he found an excuse to take her for a stroll. Madame Doe mumbled softly. A good man who's willing to buy things for his wife. What a rare and endangered species. Doe, she was indeed a very good person. No matter what small item she fancied, he would happily pay for it. Of course, she didn't buy anything expensive. Most of them were ornaments, sachets, or snacks from the stalls. In ancient times, the market was poor and there weren't many goods. Women only shopped for the atmosphere and they got bored after a while. Doe, she saw that she looked a little tired, so he offered to take a break at the tea house. What are you thinking about, madam? Doe, she saw that she stirred the tea but didn't drink it, looking absent-minded. Indeed, the woman didn't drink tea. Tea in this era was a dark cuisine. All kinds of seasonings were used to boil it and the taste was very strange. I'm thinking about Feng Ren's declaration of war. Her mouth moved faster than her brain. When she realized what she had said, she hurriedly tried to salvage the situation. She silently held her vest tightly and looked pitiful. The salted fish in the live broadcast room was angry that she didn't fight for it. It wasn't easy for her to survive until now, but this lucky emperor actually blew up her own vest. Doe, she ignored the way the woman addressed Feng Ren, and his sharp ears heard the word, declaration of war. His heart skipped a beat. He suddenly understood something and almost dropped the teacup. I didn't say anything just now. Doe, she looked at her. Although it was a familiar face, her expression was unusually unfamiliar. This person was more lively than his own daughter. Looking at her, little Lucky Star was really young. What did Madame say just now? Doe, she looked puzzled, as if he really didn't hear anything he shouldn't have. The woman coughed softly. I didn't say anything just now. Doe, she accompanied her as they strolled to many places outside. The sun gradually darkened the horizon. After returning to the residence, Doe, she asked the kitchen to prepare a rather sumptuous meal. The chef in the kitchen muttered in a low voice. It's not the new year, could it be that something good happened? Although Doe, she was rich, he wasn't extravagant and extravagant. As a son of a peasant family, his style was still very simple. Now, however, he was serving a distinguished guest. The kitchen staff were naturally surprised. Doe, she saw that the woman's expression was as usual, and her dining etiquette was also good. He secretly thought to himself, Lucky Star's living conditions in the past must not be poor. Unbeknownst to him, the woman proudly posted a bullet screen in the live broadcast room. There's still half an hour to 12 hours. I didn't blow up my vest, isn't I amazing? The salted fish all gave her likes. Amazing, amazing. Jiang Pingji was speechless. Forget it, let's not expose her. Doe, she didn't mean to hurt anyone, so there shouldn't be too much to worry about. In fact, Jiang Pingji didn't have to worry about the woman. Dream of 1,000 years was a welfare activity, so naturally there were sound protective measures. Apart from the necessary prompts, once the participants were threatened, they would be sent back in advance. If the experiencer did anything that would destroy the bad guy, the experience would also be forcibly ended. Not everyone who participated in the activity was so unlucky to meet Feng Ren and Doe Shi, two shrewd people, right off the bat. Chapter 1425. After dinner, the woman found that the Dream of 1,000 Years activity had entered its last 20 minutes. She felt relieved and a little regretful at the same time. Her goal was to touch the streamer's hand. She didn't expect to be placed in Yangshan in Shangyang County, which was several days away from Shangyang County in Fengyi County. Thinking of this, her loyal expression showed some regret. Doe Shi saw it. Would you like to accompany me for a walk in the courtyard? Doe Shi asked for her opinion. Perhaps because there were only 20 minutes left, the woman was not as frightened as she was at the beginning. Instead, she responded with a smile. Let's walk after dinner. I'm 99 years old, of course I have to go. The wooden clogs fell on the cobblestone path with a crisp and rhythmic sound. The woman didn't deliberately fall behind or beside Doe Shi. Instead, she overtook him by half a body's length. There was a small garden in the Doe mansion, complete with rockery and flowers. The overall layout looked very elegant. Doe Shi couldn't help laughing when he saw that she couldn't even walk properly. He couldn't help but have some funny thoughts. I'm Doe from Yangshan, also known as Shanju Sanren. May I take the liberty to ask, what is the name of this girl who is more beautiful than a flower? The woman's heart skipped a beat. She turned to look at Doe Shi. Seeing his smiling eyes, she became more and more uncertain. At this time, the system considerately gave her a reminder. System, high warning. Don't say anything you shouldn't. If necessary, the system will silence you. In addition to this warning, the system also thoughtfully gave her other options. The woman chose one of them. She answered with a stiff smile, I'm already married. Where did you come from, lecher? She laughed and didn't continue to make things difficult for her. The two chatted for a while and went to the water pavilion near the garden. This water pavilion was where she read in the shade in the summer. On weekdays, servants would take care of it on time. One could see the pond when they opened the window. The water pavilion is built here. Won't we get bitten by mosquitoes in the summer? The woman murmured. She didn't see she turn around and take something from the treasure pavilion. When she looked away, she saw she holding a fushi zither in his arms. The woman didn't know much about zither, but she felt that ancient zither were antiques and definitely not bad. You want to play the zither? The woman asked Doshi. Doshi nodded and asked with a smile, do you want to play? A phoenix seeking a phoenix? The woman rolled her eyes and thought about it. She found that she didn't know any other ancient zither songs except for the phoenix seeking for a phoenix. Doshi declined with a smile, this song, this husband is not very familiar with it. It's better not to embarrass myself in front of madam. The woman said, then play what you're good at. You can play anything. Even if he played blindly, she wouldn't be able to tell if it was good or bad. Since that's the case, your husband will embarrass himself. She said with a smile. Before he played, he gave him a gift. A look of surprise appeared in the woman's eyes. For me? She nodded, yes, it's for you. It was a palm-sized box. The carvings on the outside of the box were exquisite and delicate, and the box exuded a light and pleasant fragrance. The woman gently opened it and saw a beautiful piece of jade lying inside. Even though she didn't know much about jade, she was still mesmerized by it. So pretty, the woman said dryly. As a workaholic who had graduated from the National College entrance examination for many years, she felt for the first time that she was clumsy. She racked her brains but could not think of a suitable compliment. If it was her before and after the National College entrance examination, she would definitely be able to speak eloquently and not embarrass herself in front of the ancients. After she burned incense and washed his hands, he played a song. The woman could not tell whether it was good or bad, but she felt that the tune was very pleasant. She sat sideways next to the piano table and supported her chin with one hand. The sudden drowsiness made her head nod bit by bit. Countdown. 3, 2, 1. Dream of 1,000 years, activity has ended. Thank you for your participation and cooperation. Thank you. Oh, I slept so well. The cute girl lifted the quilt in a daze. Suddenly, something sharp poked her hand. She touched it casually and felt a cold box. She suddenly woke up and grabbed it. When she looked at it, she exclaimed, "Oh my God!" She sat up in shock. All the hair on her body stood on end. Her muddled mind instantly woke up, and the memories from before she went to sleep flooded her. This isn't this? She looked at the thing in her hand in a daze. She carefully opened the box and found a beautiful piece of jade lying inside. Yes, it's for you. Doshi's voice echoed in her mind. She slapped her cheeks and suddenly had the illusion that her identity had been exposed. She slid down the Simmons bed and ran to the computer desk. The computer screen was still on the Empress's live broadcast forum interface. She took a look at the forum and saw that the number of replies had skyrocketed to millions. There were so many messages and she did not have time to read them one by one. After thinking about it, she sat on the computer chair and turned on the front camera of her phone. She held the box in her hand and took a selfie with a smile. Then she used Photoshop to cover her face and the decorations in the room and uploaded the picture to the forum. Original poster: I am the lucky girl that you all envy and hate. Although it is a little regretful that I did not successfully touch the host's little hand, I also received a precious gift. Look, don't the box and the beautiful jade in my hand look super familiar? Lala, are you envious? She was afraid that others would not catch the main point, so she simply drew a red circle on the box in the photo to mark the main point. Many salted fish were eager to try the Dream of 1,000 Years activity, but there were also salted fish who were worried. What were they worried about? They were worried that the so-called transmigration was a lie and that they might not be able to return after transmigrating. What was the difference between this and murder? The original poster's post had not been updated, and many onlookers expressed their deep concern. 12 hours had passed, and they actually saw the original poster's reply on the post. Their first reaction was, "Very good, the original poster is still alive, and the transmigration activity should be real." Their second reaction was, F***CK. Envy, jealousy, and hate. They wished they could raise a torch and roast this fresh and juicy lucky girl. The news of the lucky girl's successful return successfully rushed to the top of Weibo, suppressing countless celebrities in the entertainment industry. Apart from the onlookers who admired the lucky girl's luck, The rest of the onlookers raised the torch of jealousy and burned it. At the same time, Doxi's wife gradually woke up and revealed an expression that Doxi was familiar with. Zongguang. Doxi's wife pinched her eyebrows and felt a little better. Madam, how do you feel? Doxi revealed a look of joy and excitedly grabbed the other party's hand. Only then did he realize that the gift he gave to little lucky girl had disappeared. He did not think too much about it and hurriedly called for a doctor to take his wife's pulse. The doctor was also surprised. A while ago he was certain that she would not live for more than half a month, but now her pulse was strong and healthy, not at all like a dying patient. Doxi's wife told Doxi in private, "I had a dream not long ago." What dream? Chapter 1426. The ancients were still in awe of gods and ghosts, and Doxi was no exception. Hearing his wife talk about this dream, he was even more convinced. He couldn't help but rejoice. Madam has the help of a lucky star. Doxi told his wife about what happened during the day. Madame Doxi was pleasantly surprised. In that case, we should set up a longevity tablet for this benefactor and worship him every day. Doxi nodded. There was something he didn't say. He felt that he was about to get lucky. Although little Lucky Star did not say everything, but according to the information he inadvertently revealed, Feng Ren's sudden visit was definitely not what he had said. Perhaps the Duke of Lanting really wanted to recruit and promote him. If that was the case, he would really be able to fulfill his ambitions and bring honor to his ancestors. After waiting anxiously for a few days, Feng Ren went to the mansion again. After the small talk, Feng Ren really asked him if he wanted to become an official. Doxi's heart raced and he barely held back his excitement. He spoke of his ambition in a reserved manner, indirectly responding to his plan to become an official. Feng Ren smiled and stroked his beard. Duke Lanting has long admired Zongguang's talent and wants to recruit him. Are you willing to work for him? Doxi stood up and bowed. He said resolutely, I am willing to serve you faithfully. When he received Jiang Pingji's personal letter of conquest, his fingertips were still trembling. What did it mean to have joy after extreme misfortune? This was it. Previously, Doxi was still worried about his wife's illness. Now that his wife had recovered from her illness and had a bright future, it was simply too wonderful. While Doxi was packing his luggage and preparing to head to Xiangyang district to take up his post, Jiang Pingji's plans for the public toilet and breeding farm were also put on the agenda. She took into account the economic and road conditions of various places and circled 10 places to set up breeding farms. In comparison, the cost of inspecting public toilets was much lower, and the number was much larger. Jiang Pingji planned to build a public toilet in a crowded area. Not only did she have to choose the location, but she also had to pay attention to the shape of the toilet that blended in with the surrounding environment so that it wouldn't look too out of place. Of course, considering the current trend, Jiang Pingji was even stricter with the women's toilets. Not only did she have to ensure privacy when she went to the toilet, but she also had to prevent hooligans from intentionally offending her. Therefore, it was necessary to arrange for people to guard the women's toilets. Naturally, the maintenance of the public toilets also required people. This way he could increase the number of jobs. Although this job was dirty, smelly, and tiring, it could earn enough money to support a family. Naturally, there was no need to worry that no one would want to do it. Jiang Pingji bit her pen and tried to point out the areas that needed attention in the old public toilet. To think that I, the commander of the Federation Army, have to worry about the problem of public toilets. When I was in the Federation, it was none of my business even if the public toilets of the department were blocked. I'm really regressing. Jiang Pingji held the pen in her mouth and grumbled. She hadn't been able to sleep well for the past few days because of the issue with the toilet and the farm. You manage the weather, the earth, and the people's daily needs. How is she a farm owner? She's clearly a full-time nanny. Jiang Pingji lay on the mat beside the table like a piece of streaky pork on a chopping board. She put her hands behind her head and opened the bamboo scroll on her face to block the sunlight. She propped one foot up and placed the other on the table. Her bare feet dangled in the air. The moment Qiguan Rang entered, he saw his lord's demeanor as if it had been eaten by a dog. His eyebrows twitched, but he didn't say anything in the end. Not to mention women, even men rarely disregarded etiquette like this. Greetings, my lord. Qiguan Rang bowed. Jiang Pingji blew at the bamboo scroll and realized that it wouldn't budge. She then lifted her hand and removed it. Wenjing? What's the matter? Jiang Pingji yawned and sat up lazily. She still looked weak and lethargic. Has my lord been very sleepy lately? Qiguan Rang asked tentatively. He didn't have a chance to feel Jiang Pingji's pulse, so he could only beat around the bush. It wasn't a good sign that his lord, who had always been lively and energetic, suddenly felt sleepy and liked to sleep. Jiang Pingji rested her chin on her hand and muttered, "Wenjing, I haven't slept for 4 or 5 days. Do you think I'm sleepy?" Although she didn't have dark circles under her eyes, it was true that she stayed up late. For so many days she was either out on an inspection trip or staying indoors to plan and draw. She also had to rack her brains to think of problems that might occur after the implementation of the plan and come up with countermeasures in advance. When she was busy, it wasn't as easy for her as Qiguan Rang and the others. Qiguan Rang and the others were all ordinary people. Their physical endurance was limited. It was impossible for them to be busy day and night. Although it was said that working overtime was extremely tiring, it wasn't really tiring when the working hours were calculated. Feng Zhen and Yang Si could even get together and drink. Jiang Pingji was at a disadvantage. She was in good physical condition, so she didn't show any signs of exhaustion even if she stayed up late to fight. In addition, she often skipped work, which gave people the impression that she didn't do proper work. Before Qiguan Rang showed a distressed and disapproving look, Jiang Pingji asked him again, "Wenjing, is there anything?" Qiguan Rang presented a thick booklet to her. Jiang Pingji picked it up and glanced at it. "This is Wenbin's handwriting. Is there any progress on his side?" Han Yu's work for the past year was to sort out the old laws and compile new ones, such as the previous marriage law and the child protection law that he was busy with. As long as the war was not urgent, Jiang Pingji didn't plan to let Han Yu go to the battlefield again. It wasn't that Han Yu's military talent wasn't good. On the contrary, Han Yu almost killed Yang Si and made Jiang Pingji suffer a great loss. His talent was beyond doubt. However, Jiang Pingji felt that everyone had their own platform to show their talents. Compared to the battlefield, it was more suitable for Han Yu. So far, Jiang Pingji couldn't find a suitable legal talent other than Han Yu. Han Yu outshone the others. Of course, if Han Yu preferred the battlefield, Jiang Pingji wouldn't stop him. The battlefield was risky, but he could accumulate merits quickly. Qiguan Rang said, "Yes, but Wenbin is not in good spirits. He hasn't slept for several days. Let him rest first." Looking at the dark circles under Han Yu's eyes, Han Yu would die suddenly if he continued to practice immortality. Qiguan Rang didn't want anything to happen to Han Yu, so he coaxed him to go home to sleep. Since Jiang Pingji and Qiguan Rang had a showdown, Qiguan Rang had placed Han Yu and Wei Ci at the top of his heart. They were both his precious eggs. For the sake of his precious egg, he was willing to personally run an errand. Jiang Pingji carefully looked at the first-generation manuscript that Qiguan Rang handed to her. Her brows loosened and furrowed from time to time. She looked serious. "My lord, how is it?" Jiang Pingji said, "There are still some shortcomings. Many parts are a bit cumbersome. Laws are different from other things. The parts that should be simplified, and the parts that should be detailed. There is no room for lawbreakers to take advantage of. However, according to the standards of the first-generation manuscript, Wenbin didn't disappoint me. When Zheng, go back and tell him to stay at home and recuperate. He will come back to see me in 3 to 5 days." Qiguan Rang said, "Yes." After Qiguan Rang left, Jiang Pingji went to the bookshelf and took out a brand new book. She called the maid to grind the ink. Jiang Pingji made a copy of Han Yu's manuscript. She planned to proofread, correct, and supplement the parts with the audience in the streaming room. "He will die suddenly sooner or later. I've never been so hard-working in my previous life. Keep working. I'll be a slave for the rest of my life." Chapter 1427. Did you see that? This is called squandering money like water. Sometimes I feel like I'm more of a prodigal than Zhao. Jiang Pingji looked at the budget book presented by Su Ke. She was shocked and self-deprecating at the same time. The farm could at least achieve a balance of income and expenditure, but it was impossible for the public toilets. Not only was there no room for profit, but a large amount of money had to be spent on maintenance and renovation. The only benefit was probably an increase in employment and a stable supply of raw materials for fertilizer. Jiang Pingji sighed and covered her eyes with her hands to avoid looking at the account book on the table. If it wasn't for the friendly sponsorship of the Tao family, Jiang Pingji's funds would have been in trouble. Su Ke advised, "My lord, you should think on the bright side. If this is really good for farming and fertilizer, do you still have to worry about compensation in the future? If the fertilizer problem was solved, there would be a bumper harvest every year. The grain tax alone would reach a new high. Why would she feel distressed about this small expenditure?" Jiang Pingji rested her chin on her hand and said, I like what Xiaoyu said. Time will prove that my squandering is meaningful. After spending most of the day dealing with official affairs, Jiang Pingji got up from the table and loosened her muscles in an inelegant manner. Perhaps it was because she hadn't been completely active for a long time, she was always lazy. She would go to the drill ground to find Fu Wang and the others to practice some skills. Jiang Pingji did a few stretching exercises and rubbed her sore neck. She heard the sound of footsteps approaching from outside. It's almost lunchtime. Is there anything else? Jiang Pingji was about to have lunch. Couldn't they let her rest? My lord, Doshi has come to take office. The secretary is asking how to settle him. Jiang Pingji raised her eyebrows and put down her hand that was rubbing her neck. Bring him to me. I'll settle him myself. Although Feng Ju and Feng Rin both recognized Doshi's talent, Jiang Pingji was strict with people. She still had to check on him personally. In the other room, Doshi was waiting for the result anxiously. He felt like Yang Shan, who was favored by the Jinlin branch. He was like a pig standing on the wind, waiting for the moment to take off. Doshi had tried his best to overestimate his future, but he still underestimated it. When others told him that Lu Shi, the feudal lord, had personally received him, Doshi was so stunned that he almost fell into a daze. Despite the tempestuous waves in his heart, Doshi's expression remained calm and composed. His every move seemed to have been measured with a ruler, and there was nothing wrong with it. Commoner Doshi greets the Duke of Lanting. Even in his old age, Doshi still remembered that kowtowing in the hall lasted his entire life. Jiang Pingji gazed deeply at Doshi below with her slightly indifferent eyes. She sized him up for a while before moving her eyes away. She helped Doshi up and asked, "You are Zhongguang?" "It's just as old Mr. Feng said, he's a dragon among men." Doshi stood up and said humbly, "I'm just a commoner in the countryside. I've done nothing to deserve such a great honor." What's so difficult about making a contribution? True gold is not afraid of the red cauldron. Zhongguang is talented and only lacks an opportunity to easily rise to the top. Jiang Pingji teased Doshi with a smile and said, "In my opinion, it's not that Zhongguang can't bear the responsibility, it's that it doesn't suit Zhongguang." Doshi panicked even more and his heart was filled with apprehension. It was a good thing that the new boss thought highly of him, but it wasn't a good thing to have high expectations of him. If the expectations were too high and he failed to reach the other party's bottom line, he would be the unlucky one. However, Jiang Pingji had made it a dead end. Doshi couldn't accept it arrogantly, nor could he refuse it humbly. He was in a dilemma. Just as he was getting anxious, Jiang Pingji smiled and said to him, "What does Zhongguang think of the position of Officer of the Code of Agriculture?" "Officer of the Code of Agriculture?" Doshi was shocked and hurriedly said, "I don't dare to occupy a high position in order to make a contribution. Please take back your order, Lord Lanting." Officer of the Code of Agriculture sounded like a farmer, but he was qualified to be in charge of agricultural production, civil affairs, and land rent. He had a lot of power. Doshi had been a commoner before, but he had become Officer of the Code of Agriculture after a short while. His authority was similar to that of a county chief. Wasn't this attracting hatred? Seeing that Doshi was about to break out in a sweat, Jiang Pingji laughed and said, "Don't be so nervous. Officer of the Code of Agriculture isn't a lucrative job for me. Since you're from a farming family, this position is naturally suitable for you. We can't let Han Mei and the others take on this position. It's not right." Li Yun was a general who led troops to war. After he came back, he not only had to train the troops, but he also had to manage the fields. It was too much of a waste of energy. Even if Li Yun's achievements in agriculture were not bad, he was not a professional after all. It was not right for him to continue taking on this position. Doshi stubbornly said, "I'm not worthy of this position. I dare not accept your order." If one's virtue did not match the position, there would be a calamity. It was a good thing that a pie fell from the sky, but if the pie was too big, it could crush someone to death. At that moment, salted fish in the streaming room reminded Jiang Pingji. "Zi Xiao Xiao, streamer, have pity on him. Don't continue to scare him. This is like a graduate applying for a job in the world's top 500. If he's not careful, he'll be pushed to the position of a department head. You're not afraid that he won't do well, but he'll be worried that he won't do well. Yi Wu Yanling, streamer, let him start from an inconspicuous position. If he's really capable, he'll rise sooner or later. If he's suddenly promoted to the position of officer of the Diannong, even if he's really capable, the people below him won't be convinced. This will be troublesome. Since you're so insistent, I won't force you." Jiang Pingji took in salted fish's opinion and took a step back. I'll reserve the position of officer of the Dienong for you. When you make a contribution you can take it at any time. Zhongguang, don't tell me that you don't even have this little bit of confidence? She could tell that Jiang Pingji really had high hopes for him. He said resolutely, I'll do my best to repay Lord Lanting's kindness. Jiang Pingji was not a person who liked to procrastinate. Since she was already in her camp, there was no trial period. She rolled up her sleeves and went to work directly. The fertility of the farmland had been declining due to the non-stop farming in the past few years. If she did not try to remedy it, the harvest in the next 2 years would be very poor. Time was precious. She could take up his post as soon as he came. It would be best if he could produce results that satisfied her. Old Master Feng should have shown you the manuscript, right? What do you think? She told the truth. If it can be written into a book, it'll be a classic in the farming field. Everyone will regard it as a standard. Jiang Pingji burst into laughter. It's just scribbles. How can it be worthy of what you're talking about? She was dumbfounded when he heard that. Even his smart brain did not work well. Lord Lanting's words meant. Could it be that the manuscript was written by her? Jiang Pingji clapped her hands. The person waiting outside the house carried all the manuscript and thoughts she had sorted out. Although she had some general knowledge about agriculture, it was just a trifle. At most, she could see further than Shi and see the big picture more comprehensively. Chapter 1428. These manuscripts should be of some use to you. Take all of them back for reference. Jiang Pingji said bluntly, there are more complete regulations for farming. I'll get someone to send you a copy when the time comes. There shouldn't be any mistakes if you follow it step by step. Zhongguang's main task is to formulate a detailed regulation on how to replenish the fertility of the farmland. It's best if it can be used next spring to guarantee a harvest the next year. When Shi heard that, he was both excited and forced a smile. This was a big task. If it was done well, he would be worthy of the title of cadet. If it was not done well, it would not be as simple as ruining his reputation. He would lose all standing and reputation. However, Shi was not a man who backed down when faced with a difficult problem. He took a deep breath and solemnly accepted this important task. The first batch of public toilets was built within the boundaries of Xiangyang district. Basically, there was one public toilet on each street. Every toilet was divided into 2 sections for men and women. Due to the lack of technology, although Xiangyang district had drainage pipes, there was no network management system specially used to deal with dirty excrement. If public toilets were to be built, they could only choose dry toilets. Someone would be sent to clean the manure tank regularly to ensure that the smell would not be too strong. This move won the support of many people. Although there were toilet buckets in their homes, it was not easy to deal with. They could not build toilets for every household. When they went out to work or do business, many people and traders could only find a secluded place to relieve themselves. It was fine for men. They could lift their pants and turn their backs to the crowd. Any corner of the wall could be a toilet, but it was inconvenient for women. From a certain perspective, this was one of the reasons that prevented women from leaving the shackles of their families. Although Jiang Pingji was strict with the public security and health management of Xiangyang district, there were always people who knowingly violated the law. It was better on the main streets where business was flourishing. People did not dare to act recklessly. However, it was bad in the remote corners. When the weather was hot, the stench was overwhelming. Sometimes when they went out, they would accidentally step on a pile of cow, sheep, pig, dog, or human waste. This was the situation in the big cities, not to mention the small places. Regarding this, the ordinary people were used to it. They had nothing to complain about. Unexpectedly, Jiang Pingji suddenly came up with such a move. The ordinary people naturally celebrated and beamed with joy. People were thick-skinned. Even illiterate people had a sense of shame. They also knew that exposing their private parts in the open was an eyesore. They had no choice in the past. It would be great if there were public toilets for them to solve their physiological problems. Most of the commoners were looking forward to it, but not everyone was in favor of this plan. There was no lack of contrarians in this world who felt good about themselves and would find fault with everything. Who doesn't have a bowl? Why did they have to make such a thing? It's really a waste of manpower and money. He was scolding Jiang Pingji for looking for trouble and for not knowing where to spend her money. What kind of public toilets are separated by gender? Most of the women don't go out at all. What's the point of doing this? Although the public toilet isn't an open field, it's not a house either. How can a woman take off her clothes as she pleases? If she's not careful, someone might see it. This was because the existence of women's toilets was meaningless. Some people were worried that women would be taken advantage of in public toilets. If a woman was offended in a public toilet, who would she look to for justice? When Jiang Pingji said that the female toilet would be strictly guarded to ensure the safety of the women, the group of people had something to say. It took so much manpower to manage and maintain a public building that was not profitable at all. It was really a waste of manpower and money. Jiang Pingji was speechless. The contrarians really couldn't be provoked. No matter what she did, they could find fault with it. No matter how the group of ancient keyboard warriors pointed at the country and spoke with vigor, Jiang Pingji still had to do what she had to do. She had a lot of things on her hands. Not only did she have to follow Hanyu to revise the child protection law several times, but she also had to make the law conform to morality and adapt to the current trend. She also had to guide Doshi from the side. The group of people traveled from south to north. Once she was busy, she forgot everything. When the public toilets were completed and put into use, the child protection law began to take shape, and Doshi figured out a simple plan to gain weight. More than a month passed by in a flash. The temperature was getting colder. It was late autumn. Jiang Pingji finally found a chance to take a breath and stop her busy steps. Of course, she didn't relax much. There was still a pile of official documents in the government office. When she was ready to face reality with a tragic heart, she found a figure who looked like a pine and bamboos sitting in the hall with his head bent over the table. Jiang Pingji rubbed her eyebrows and went forward to ask, "Zixiao, have you recovered from your illness?" Wei Ci heard the movement and raised his head to look at Jiang Pingji. His slightly pale lips curled into a warm smile. He stood up and bowed. "Greetings, my lord. Ci has recovered greatly." Jiang Pingji squeezed his hand. The temperature of his hand was much lower than normal. "You call this recovering greatly?" "It wasn't easy for me to grow that little bit of fat in the past. It's all gone after not seeing you for a while. Although government affairs are busy, we still have enough manpower. Why did a sick person like you jump out to join in the fun?" She sighed. "If you really want to recuperate, you should be rounder, right?" Jiang Pingji preferred slightly chubby men. It felt good to hold and touch them. However, Wei Ci belonged to the typical type of person who couldn't gain weight no matter how much she raised him. Wei Ci said, "To be able to do something within my ability for my lord, for me, this is more nourishing than any nourishing medicine." Things happened one after another outside. He saw it and felt anxious. How could he sit still? When the injuries on his body were almost healed, Wei Ci immediately returned to his post. He was a model worker. Jiang Pingji sat by the table and played with his big sleeve with one hand. "So, Zixiao, are you sure that you've recovered?" Wei Ci's gaze was somewhat puzzled, but he still nodded honestly. "Zixiao, do you still remember that I said that I would give you a gift when you've recovered?" The corners of Jiang Pingji's lips curled into a malicious smile. Wei Ci's heart was pounding. He had an ominous premonition. "I'm indeed almost recovered." Wei Ci could only think about it again and again. "My lord loves me so much. My family doesn't lack anything." Jiang Pingji used her index finger to touch his lips. She smiled and said, Wrong. You really don't have the thing that I want to give you." Wei Ci was speechless. The ominous premonition was getting stronger. What should he do? Although he said so, Wei Ci waited for a long time uneasily, but he didn't receive the gift that Jiang Pingji was talking about. He was relieved and a little melancholic at the same time. Did my lord forget? Of course not. Jiang Pingji was simply too busy. It was nearing the end of the year. There would only be a lot of things waiting to be dealt with. How would she have the extra energy to think about love affairs? Anyway, Wei Ci's frog soup had been cooked for so many years. Whether it was earlier or later, the result would be the same. Feng Zhen saw that Jiang Pingji could still smile even when she was so busy. He suddenly felt horrified. "My lord, have you encountered something good?" Jiang Pingji raised her hand and placed it on Feng Zhen's shoulder. She smiled unrestrainedly. "Take a guess." Chapter 1429. "I can't guess it." Feng Zhen helplessly brushed her hand away. He did not want Wei Ci to see him with his arm around his lord's shoulder. Who could withstand Wei Ci's ability to brew vinegar? Fortunately, Jiang Pingji's temperament was also a typical example of a wanton and unrestrained person, so she did not mind Feng Zhen's actions. "In any case, it's not a good thing," Feng Zhen said honestly. "Every time the Lord smiles so beautifully, someone is bound to be unlucky." His desire to live was very strong. He had just secretly insulted Jiang Pingji, and then he immediately flattered her. Jiang Pingji touched her face and muttered, "Does my smile look good?" Feng Zhen lied and said, "You look good." When Zixiao saw it, his legs went soft and he couldn't walk anymore. But who would be the unlucky one? His lord was really not a kind person. Since he was targeted by her, he could only pray for his own good luck. "Beauty is in the eye of the beholder," Jiang Pingji said with a smile. "Even if I don't smile, his legs will go soft and he won't be able to walk." When Feng Zhen heard this, he suddenly felt like his stomach was cramping up. In the past, the Lord still knew how to cover up the fact that she had an affair with Wei Ci, but now she was not afraid at all and was even narcissistic. If Feng Zhen knew about the existence of the streaming room, he would know that Jiang Pingji's action was called public display of affection, also known as public display of affection. "My lord, please take it easy." Feng Zhen laughed bitterly and said, "Even though anyone who isn't blind can see it clearly, it hasn't been made public. Everyone can still lie to themselves and turn a blind eye to it. If this really gets out, it won't be easy to clean up the mess." It was one thing for everyone to know, but it was another for Jiang Pingji to expose her relationship with Wei Ci and announce it to the public. The relationship between Feng Zhen and Jiang Pingji was not only that of a subject and a ruler, but also that of a good friend. He treated Wei Ci like a teacher and a friend. From Feng Zhen's point of view, he really didn't want the two of them to be harmed by external forces. Of course, feelings were a matter between two people, but it also depended on their status. Jiang Pingji and Wei Ci's identity and status meant that she could not openly push Wei Ci to the surface. This wasn't love, it was harm, and it was the embodiment of immaturity. Feng Zhen and the others were also very clear about their bottom line. They didn't care how they interacted in private, but on the surface, their relationship could only be that of a ruler and a subject. As a feudal lord, Jiang Pingji had a naturally powerful position. Nothing would happen to her. The one who would be hurt in the end would only be Wei Ci. "I didn't make a big deal out of it, did I?" Jiang Pingji said with a smile. "I know what to do." Feng Zhen muttered, "That's hard to say." After all, feelings between a man and a woman can get to their heads. Otherwise, why would it be said that the land of tenderness was the grave of a hero? No matter how brave his lord was, didn't he still succumb to the beauty Wei Ci in the end? Jiang Pingji couldn't help but roll her eyes. She said sarcastically, "We've known each other for so many years. When have you ever seen me do something irrational? Instead of making a big fuss and losing Zixiao, it would be better to maintain the status quo, to live in the same quilt and die in the same grave." "My lord, what you mean by this?" Feng Zhen was very good at grasping the main point. He asked, "When did you set your eyes on Zixiao?" He had thought that it was bad enough that Wei Ci had set his eyes on the 12-year-old lord. He didn't expect the two of them to be double arrows. Jiang Pingji coughed lightly and dismissed him. "Why are you asking so clearly? Do you still want the young lord?" If it weren't for Jiang Pingji's strong style, who knew how many people would have been urging her to get married? Don't think that she didn't know that this group of people secretly yearned for the young lord. Feng Zhen couldn't help but cover his face secretly. "I do want him. Unfortunately, Zixiao is a man and can't bear the heavy responsibility of childbearing. Besides, the young lord shouldn't have come at this time." This was the disadvantage of being a lord. She had to do it herself after 10 months. She couldn't be like a man and throw the child to the woman after they had sex. That wasn't right. As Feng Zhen said this, he suddenly thought of something. His lord and Wei Ci had been together for so many years. Why hadn't there been any good news? His lord's body couldn't make it? Impossible. His lord was more violent than a bear in the wild. Chasing a tiger across a ravine was no joke. Then Wei Ci's body couldn't make it? Feng Zhen thought of Wei Ci's weak body. He suddenly felt his teeth hurt and his stomach hurt. It hurt everywhere. He had thought of everything, but he didn't think that his lord hadn't taken Wei Ci at all. Wei Ci was still a virgin. He couldn't be blamed for not thinking of it. It was purely because Jiang Pingji was too familiar with him when they went to the brothel. She was even more familiar with prostitutes than he was. After confirming their gazes, there was no doubt that she was an experienced driver. Which experienced driver would guard a piece of meat that was already in his mouth and not bite it? After a bunch of reasoning, Feng Zhen could only tremble and accept the cruel answer that Wei Ci's body couldn't make a woman pregnant. He knew his lord's temperament. When she was stubborn, even 10 bulls couldn't pull her back. Who had the ability to force her to have sex with a strange man for the sake of a child? Taking 10,000 steps back, even if his lord was willing to have sex with a second person, according to her standards, the person who was qualified to touch her bed couldn't be worse than Wei Ci. Then the problem was, how many men in this world could be better than Wei Ci? He handled both internal and external affairs at the same time. From big schemes to small trifles, there was nothing he couldn't handle. He was talented, had good looks, and had a good temperament. He could abandon his principles for his lord. With such high standards, how many men in this world could compete with him? Forget to mention, Wuxia kept his chastity to his lord. Even if he found someone with conditions comparable to Wuxia, he would probably have a bunch of beautiful wives and concubines. His children would run around everywhere. As he thought about it, Feng Zhen suddenly felt his heart ache. Jiang Pingji didn't know what he was imagining. She asked in surprise, "Is your body unwell?" Feng Zhen said, "No. I suddenly remembered something. I'll take my leave first." Jiang Pingji said, "Then go do what you need to do." Feng Zhen turned around and went to find a famous doctor. He packed everything up and sent it to Wei Xi's manor. Coincidentally, Wei Xi was still busy dealing with official documents. Feng Zhen went forward and snatched his pen, then dragged him to the bed and sat him down. Wei Xi looked at Feng Zhen, then looked at the doctors behind him who were carrying medical boxes and waiting for him. He was dumbfounded the whole time. What happened? Feng Zhen asked the doctors to take Wei Xi's pulse one by one. He didn't allow Wei Xi to stop them. When the doctors finished taking his pulse, they all looked at Feng Zhen mysteriously. This time it was Feng Zhen's turn to be dumbfounded. Wei Xi frowned and sent the doctors away. He asked helplessly, "Zisher, what's wrong with you today?" "What Feng Zisher?" He might as well ask someone to come and go crazy. Feng Zhen said, "If it's not your problem, is it the Lord's problem?" If that was the case, this was even more serious than Wei Xi's health problems. If the Lord couldn't give birth, it would be a dead end. Chapter 1430. Wei Xi's heart trembled. He mistakenly thought that something was wrong with Jiang Pingji and hurriedly asked, "What's wrong with the Lord?" Feng Zhen stammered, "I'm not sure, it's just a guess. The Lord, perhaps, can't give birth?" Upon hearing this, Wei Xi sternly reprimanded, "Who's spreading this rumor? The Lord's body is fine. Her Majesty couldn't give birth, so how did the two children in her previous life come about? Did they pop out of a rock?" Feng Zhen lowered his voice and said, "It's not your problem, it's not the Lord's problem. Then why haven't we seen any traces of the young Lord after so many years? Even if they spent more time apart than together, the two of them had been adulterous for so many years, shouldn't they have gotten together at least once? The Lord is still pure." Upon hearing this, Wei Xi's ears reddened. "Where did you hear these rumors?" Feng Zhen was shocked. He was really shocked this time. "You coveted the Lord when she was 12 years old. Now she's almost 22 years old, yet you two are still pure?" Feng Zhen thought that he had heard wrongly. This was even more ridiculous than a sow climbing a tree or a sago blossoming. Jiang Pingji went to the brothel to drink wine with prostitutes. She was familiar with hugging people left and right, and words of love came out of her mouth. She had the skill that even the experienced prostitutes could not withstand, but she was actually a virgin? Wei Xi was embarrassed and annoyed. "You're really indecent. Who said that a man and a woman had to roll in bed when they were in love?" What kind of rubbish was Feng Zhen's brain filled with? Faced with Wei Xi's criticism, Feng Zhen could only chuckle. "You're really a virgin, you don't know the beauty of the relationship between a man and a woman." Wei Xi's ears reddened even more, almost as if they were shoulder to shoulder with the setting sun. Feng Zhen said meaningfully, "Zixiao, you're older than the Lord by 6 years. In 2 years, you'll be of age." He had always thought that men over the age of 20 were no longer virgins. He didn't expect Wei Xi to break his bottom line again and again. Wei Xi wasn't in a good mood. He didn't need Feng Zhen's reminder. He said, "There's no rush to wait a few more years. The Lord's focus now should be on conquering the world, not on relationships. No matter what, we should wait until we have more than half of Zhongzhou in our hands before considering this matter." If he remembered correctly, the first time His Majesty became pregnant was not long after the two of them had their first time. Wei Xi could not possibly take the risk of one night of pleasure and impregnate the other party, which would hinder his hegemony over the world. It was better to cultivate his moral character. To Wei Xi, physical compatibility was indeed wonderful, but it was definitely not as good as spiritual understanding and support. He was reborn to help her ascend the throne, not to drag her down. No one could stop him, not even himself. If anyone dared to obstruct him, Wei Xi would not be lenient, including himself. Feng Zhen was speechless. Zhongzhou? Zhongzhou is not a place that Dongqing or Nanxing can compare to. The Nye family of Zhongzhou is very tricky. Would he only consider having children after taking over half of Zhongzhou's territory? Who knew how many years later that would be? Wei Xi was old and weak, how could he still move? It's true that the Nye family's momentum is swift and violent. They've become the most powerful feudal power in Zhongzhou, but it's only temporary. As long as Nye Liang dies, the outside world can just stir things up a little and watch the internal strife of the Nye clan. Wei Xi revealed a rare gloomy expression. That year, a freak combination of factors allowed Nye Liang to escape from a dead end, but his body has long been damaged by the years and days of poisons. All these years he hasn't properly recuperated. Instead, he stubbornly fought for the power of the Nye clan and led the Nye clan to fight for the world in Zhongzhou. He's digging his own grave. The Nye clan of Zhongzhou was full of talents, but Wei Xi had only taken a liking to two people in his 2 lives. One was the ghost genius Nye Liang, and the other was Sun Wen. It wasn't that the others were incapable, but they were too selfish. Even if they had the ability to rule the world, there was nothing to be afraid of. Nye Liang was holding on with his life on the line. Sooner or later he wouldn't be able to hold on. Sun Wen had also been offended by the Nye clan and had long been lured to his side by Wei Xi. He wanted to see how the Nye clan, who was obsessed with internal strife, would court disaster. Feng Zhen hesitated. Do you really remember that Zixiao's family and clansmen are all in Zhongzhou, serving the Nye clan? Wei Xi's elder brother, Wei Dan, was Nye Liang's close friend and right-hand man. So what? Wei Xi's eyes were extremely cold. He said, I know which is more important and which is more important. He didn't owe the Wei clan anything. He didn't owe them anything in his previous life, and he certainly didn't owe them anything in this life. If he had no choice but to fight with his elder brother because of their positions, he would be more ruthless and let the other party die a happy death. Was he heartless? In Wei Xi's opinion, this was the greatest respect and affection. Feng Zhen could only shrug his shoulders. Since the problem he was worried about didn't exist, he didn't want to get involved. Wei Xi was still a very reliable person. Feng Zhen didn't deliberately hide this move from Jiang Pingji. She heard about it the next day and was instantly overjoyed. Zixia is really a clown. This move is simply too flashy. Is he suspecting that Zixiao isn't capable? Wei Xi was by Jiang Pingji's side. Hearing his lord's unbridled laughter, he suddenly felt tired. Zixia's suspicions aren't without reason. Let him be. But I know you can do it. If you can't, don't you still have me? Jiang Pingji wrapped her arms around Wei Xi's neck from behind. She smiled and whispered in his ear, speaking of which, he's already suspecting that you can't do it. As a man, isn't Zixiao tempted at all? Wei Xi's ears turned red. He pursed his lips and didn't speak. Did she think that he copied thousands of copies of the heart-calming incantation for nothing? Jiang Pingji saw that he didn't respond and laughed. But I'm tempted. Wei Xi was speechless. His lord? Could she not be so flirtatious? To prevent himself from getting burned, Wei Xi hurriedly found a lame excuse and left. Jiang Pingji whistled like a hooligan. She was in an unprecedentedly good mood. Who said that you can escape from the palm of my hand? Regardless of whether it was her enemy or her prey, no one could escape. This year's New Year's banquet was held as usual. Jiang Pingji gave everyone 7 days of annual leave in advance. Yes, that's right. She actually stopped writing 7 days in advance and gave everyone their annual leave. The more generous she was, the more everyone trembled with fear. Feng Zhen was even more nervous, as if he was facing a formidable enemy. Annual leave. How many years had they been yearning for it? When they personally experienced the beauty of annual leave, they felt uncomfortable all over, as if they were missing something. This year was calm and peaceful. The development of the various provinces was on the right track. One by one, the shadows of war were lifted from the ground, revealing a scene that could only be seen in a prosperous and flourishing age. As the creator of everything, Jiang Pingji's sense of achievement and satisfaction was self-evident. The New Year's banquet was held as usual. She was in a good mood and gave out big red packets to all the little kids who came to pay their New Year's greetings. When these children grow up, the world will definitely be a different scene. After all, Lu Shi was an ordinary person. It was already a long life for this body to live for 70 or 80 years. Jiang Pingji could only entrust the future to the group of children in front of her, who were full of vigor and hope. Qiguan Rang glanced at Wei Xi and sneered. We still lack a young lord. Without a young lord, no matter how many people there were in the new generation, it would be a waste. If the hard work of the previous generation could not be passed on to the next generation, wouldn't it be a waste of effort for others? Jiang Pingji was a little tipsy. There will be. She only hoped. Chapter 1431. After the New Year's banquet, everyone went back to the manor to stay up. According to previous year's practice, Jiang Pingji would either go back to sleep alone or stay up with Lu Zhao. This year was slightly different. Lu Shi and Gu Zhen were both there. As their daughter, she should accompany them. However, Jiang Pingji and Lu Shi had already laid their cards on the table. She did not want to face Lu Shi on such a beautiful day and continue to put on a fake show of filial piety. She simply said that she was not feeling well and left. Gu Zhen frowned and asked, "Where is Lanting not feeling well? Did you call the doctor to take a look?" The servant did not know and could only answer vaguely. Lu Shi, who was sitting at the head of the table, raised his eyebrows slightly and said calmly, "Lanting's status is different from the past. Since she is not feeling well, let her rest." Staying up for the new year was just a dispensable formality. He could not disturb Jiang Pingji's recuperation because of this matter. Seeing that Lu Shi had spoken, Gu Zhen could only swallow her words in embarrassment. "Fortunately, my sister did not come. If she came, I don't know how ugly this scene would be." Lu Zhao was dressed in exquisite and luxurious clothes. Since he got married, he looked much more mature, but he still had the appearance of a fair and tender rich man of leisure. No matter who saw his appearance, they would always say that he was gentle and harmless. "Why are you saying this? If others hear it, it will be embarrassing for no reason." Lu Zhao's wife still looked a little immature. Her every move was steady and polite. Hearing her husband's private murmur, she reminded him in a light tone. The two of them had been married for some time. Lu Zhao was gentle and accommodating, so the couple got along well. "I sympathize with my two cousins. It was supposed to be a happy day, but it made the whole family unhappy." Lu Zhao glanced at his two cousins with the corner of his eye and sighed in his heart. Meng Hang and Ye Sun were also unlucky. They should have stayed at home with their wives and children to stay up for the new year. They did not expect Gu Zhen to have a sudden impulse. She hoped that the two of them could bring their families to accompany her. To put it nicely, she wanted to enjoy the happiness of a family. Could they refuse? They could not. Although Lu Zhao was a complete rich man of leisure, he was not stupid. He could see clearly in the dark. From his point of view, his two sons and Gu Zhen did not have feelings for each other. She would only push them away by being so forceful. Was this a mother who was eager to make up for her two sons? Lu Zhao snickered in his heart. His stepmother in name, but his aunt in reality, was definitely not that sentimental. Lu Shi, who had raised him for 12 years, abandoned him just like that. He turned around and chose the current Jiang Pingji. In that case, how much weight did her eldest son, whom she had almost no contact with, and her youngest son, who had been missing for more than 20 years, weigh in Gu Zhen's heart? His eagerness to mend their relationship was more like trying to cover it up. She used her mother's naturally powerful identity to force her son to obey her, and then satisfy the guilt in her heart. Lu Zhao seemed gentle and harmless, but in his heart, he was not stingy with using the darkest thoughts to judge others. The whole family happily gathered together to celebrate the new year. That was the joy of a family. The group of people looked at each other, speechless. This was called mutual harm. On New Year's Eve that year, Meng Hang and Ye Sun's families had a terrible time. In the end, they had to use their children as an excuse to leave early. On Jiang Pingji's side, it was a completely different scene. Speaking of which, this is the first time I'm staying up alone with Zixiao on New Year's Eve. Jiang Pingji, who was unwell, refused to leave Wei Xi's house at that moment. Looking at her lively appearance, she did not look unwell at all. Wei Xi did not answer. He raised his hand and pushed the preserved fruit that she liked to eat in front of her. The corners of his lips curled into a faint smile. "By the way, have you opened the gift that I gave to Zixiao?" Wei Xi said, "I haven't opened it yet." Jiang Pingji rested her chin on her hand and said, "Then open it now and take a look." Wei Xi could not help but laugh. "How can you open a gift in front of the host? I'm being impolite." Jiang Pingji winked at him. Her eyes were deep and bright under the candlelight. "According to our relationship, this little bit of impoliteness is more like fun." Wei Xi could not dissuade her, so he could only take out a square red box from his sleeve. The box was wrapped in a layer of unknown material. The outer skin felt soft and delicate. Even though Wei Xi was knowledgeable, he could not recognize the fur of an animal. Under Jiang Pingji's burning gaze, he gently opened it. Under the candlelight, 2 spots of dazzling white light were reflected. It was extremely dazzling and beautiful. "Is this a ring?" Wei Xi fixed his eyes on it and realized that the white light came from the jewels inlaid on the surface of the ring. As far as he knew, this shining thing was the King Kong that was spread to the central plains from a faraway country in the west. "I heard that the hardness of gold is rare in the world. Even steel and bronze cannot be damaged. The surface of this object is smooth, and the arrangement of the cross-section seems to be regular. It doesn't look like it was formed naturally. Does my lord know who made this object? He actually has the ability to make it look like this. Jiang Pingji said, a pair of diamond rings just like you and me. She could not give Wei Ci a status, let alone announce it to the world. For Wei Ci, who was deeply educated in the ancient orthodox way, this was a pity. If he were to ask himself honestly, he reckoned that Wei Ci had not thought of this in his previous life. Now that he realized it, he naturally had to do something about it. Diamond rings? Wei Ci took out the 2 rings doubtfully and realized that the 2 rings were of different sizes. I secretly measured the thickness of your fingers to customize it, Jiang Pingji said. Shall I help you put it on? She was grateful to the old chief for buying it on her behalf. Otherwise, Jiang Pingji could only find a goldsmith in this world to make a pair. Wei Ci said reservedly, thank you for your trouble, my lord. Jiang Pingji put it on for him. She reached out her hand in satisfaction and gestured for him to put the lady's ring on her too. Pure gold was soft and easily deformed after wearing it for a long time. Diamond rings did not have this concern. Regarding this, the old chief even mocked her. Because in Jiang Pingji's era, diamonds were indeed a very cheap raw material for jewelry. It was useless even if they were hard. However, Jiang Pingji was not after the value of the diamond itself. She was after the meaning that people gave diamonds. In Salted Fish's dimension, one had to buy a diamond ring to get married. Jiang Pingji naturally followed the crowd. This object is hard and won't deform even if you wear it for a long time. It will never change. Wei Ci then realized that something was wrong. He only felt his heart was in a mess and his face turned red. Jiang Pingji reminded him, Zixiao, take a look. There's another thing in the box. Wei Ci shyly took out the thing in the box. What is this? The object was squarish, soft, and cold. He pressed his fingers together and realized that it was a 2-layer structure. There was a circle of circular objects in the middle. He was puzzled. He did not know when his lord had gone around to his back. She breathed into his ear and her fair and delicate hands slid down his neck and collarbone like agile snakes. This posture scared Wei Ci so much that his whole body froze. He did not dare to move. Chapter 1432. Every minute is worth 1,000 pieces of gold. How many minutes have you wasted? Jiang Pingji's hand slid down the front of his neatly arranged shirt. It felt extremely delicate and warm. Wei Ci's heart skipped a beat. He felt the temperature of his skin soar, and his hair stood on end. Zixiao's reaction. Do you not like me? It was clearly a complaint, but when she said it, it sounded like a mocking smile. Wei Ci wished he could find a hole to hide in and never come out again. Jiang Pingji's lips slid across his neck. It was so hot that he wanted to jump up. My lord, Wei Ci was somewhat incoherent. A scene from his previous life suddenly appeared in his mind. Although His Majesty and his lord's attitudes were not quite the same, the undeniable stance was exactly the same. Tonight, will you obey me or not? I dare not disobey. Jiang Pingji leaned on his neck and teased him with a smile. Although I have no experience in matters between men and women, I know a thing or two and have some insights. Zixiao had a son and a daughter in his previous life. Could it be that he was still an inexperienced child? Such a scene, could it be that, you have very little experience? Wei Ci's face turned red. It was not because he was shy, but because he could not be tough in front of his lord. My lord, please don't tease me. After Wei Ci finished speaking, his entire body was as red as a cooked prawn. His following words were inaudible. If Jiang Pingji did not have extraordinary hearing, she would have missed it. You should also take pity on me. It's not a good feeling to take a cold bath on New Year's Eve. Jiang Pingji smiled and said, since it's uncomfortable, why not let nature take its course? Wei Ci coughed softly and prepared to get up with great self-control. In his previous life he would not have dared to do so. From a certain point of view, was this considered being arrogant because he was favored? Jiang Pingji would not let him have his way. She held his neck with one hand, turned over and pressed his head down. Half of her body leaned on him. He could not break free even if he wanted to, so he might as well lie down and be a salted fish. Zixiao. She leaned over and whispered in his ear, I heard that a husband and wife can use sheep intestines and fish bladder as a contraceptive, but it's not safe and clean. I'm trying to empathize with your filial piety, so I specially found another substitute. This is much better than sheep intestines and fish bladder. It's safe and effective. Wei Ci was in a daze. He suddenly understood what the square-shaped thing in his hand was. He wanted to throw them away as if they were scalding hot, but Jiang Pingji was faster and held his fingers instead. Jiang Pingji asked him proudly, "Now you have no reason to object, right?" While Wei Ci was embarrassed, his breathing became heavy. He asked Jiang Pingji in a slightly hoarse voice, "What does my lord intend to do?" Jiang Pingji said, "Yin and yang are in harmony. Let nature take its course." Wei Ci said awkwardly, I dare not offend you, my lord, nor dare to overstep my authority." It was Jiang Pingji's turn to be dumbfounded. She laughed involuntarily and said, "So Zixiao likes women of lower status?" Upon hearing this, Wei Ci's jade-like face turned pale, but his breathing became heavier. It wasn't that he liked those below him. It was obvious that he didn't dare to offend those above him. For Jiang Pingji, she was both his lord and her majesty. No matter what, he did not dare to offend or overstep his boundaries even in bed. After a while, Jiang Pingji heard Wei Ci ask her in a voice as soft as a mosquito, "That thing. How do I use it?" Jiang Pingji couldn't help it anymore. She smiled as she carried Wei Ci in her arms and walked into the inner room. "Zixiao, do you know? I'm so happy with your hesitant look. I can't wait to dissect you and swallow you into my stomach." Wei Ci was speechless. As a man, there shouldn't be anything wrong with that, right? He felt that it was no different from his previous life. The only difference was that in his previous life he was directly pressed on the floor. In this life he could at least sleep on the bed. "Zixiao, what are you thinking about at this time?" Jiang Pingji couldn't wait to let go of his clothes. Her right hand slid to his waist and randomly touched the belt. She gently pulled and untied it. Wei Ci blinked and suddenly said, "If my lord is a man, this scene seems to be more reasonable." Jiang Pingji smiled and echoed, "No matter if it's a man or a woman, you can't turn the tables." After saying that, she threw the belt out of the quilt. Without the belt to bind him, it was very easy to untie his clothes. Under the flickering candlelight, she threw the clothes one by one out of the bed. Seeing that Wei Ci was about to become an egg with its shell peeled, Jiang Pingji herself was still. No, she was also missing two pieces of clothes. The lapel of her inner garment was loosened, revealing a light yellow lotus undergarment. Jiang Pingji was speechless. Wei Ci was speechless. He quietly retracted his hand, but he was caught midway. "Wei Zixiao, didn't you say not to offend or overstep your boundaries?" Wei Ci said, "Although I dare not overstep my boundaries as a ruler, men and women have different responsibilities in bed. I'm just doing my duty, that's all." After saying that, Jiang Pingji lifted the quilt and covered the two of them. Without the illumination of the candlelight, their vision was pitch black. Their other senses became more acute. Their breaths mingled and the temperature of the air rose rapidly. Jiang Pingji fumbled to untie Wei Ci's hair crown and jade hairpin, letting his long hair fall like a waterfall. She kissed him from his eyebrows to his eyes all the way to his lips. Their lips touched, and the atmosphere that was originally as warm as the spring rain immediately became as hot as the scorching sun in summer. Wei Ci was not stiff and did nothing. He took the initiative to wrap his arms around her neck and shoulders. He used his fingertips to tease the string of the undergarment and untied it. Jiang Pingji bit his lower lip in a punitive manner and teased him with a smile. "A gentleman?" Wei Ci said helplessly, "I'm also a man, but a man doesn't equal to a gentleman. Moreover, how can I restrain myself when my true love is in my arms?" Under such circumstances, it was really difficult for him to ask him to be like Lu Xiaohui. If his lord knew her place, he could still tolerate it. He really couldn't help but light a fire everywhere. "I love how you say one thing but mean another." Jiang Pingji smiled. "Now that we're being honest, I find you even more pitiful and adorable." They were originally people with feelings. A little provocation would cause dry firewood and blazing fire. Moreover, the two of them were already in a state of being honest with each other. Jiang Pingji lingered on his neck in a punitive manner. Wei Ci could only force himself to stay awake. "My lord, it's not good if someone sees traces of us tomorrow." Jiang Pingji bit his collarbone with her tiger teeth. She was neither gentle nor forceful, and the strength of her provocation made Wei Ci gasp slightly. "Who said that you can meet people tomorrow?" Wei Ci was speechless. "We have all the time in the world." Jiang Pingji smiled. "Why do you think I gave you this annual leave so readily?" Wei Ci was speechless. Jiang Pingji's hand slid down his waist. That piece of skin was extremely sensitive. He never knew that a person's body temperature could be so terrifyingly high. It seemed that he was scorched by the temperature of Jiang Pingji's palm. His whole body trembled, and his reddened eyes emitted misty water vapor. "My lord, are you in pain?" Both of their bodies stiffened for a moment. Jiang Pingji stroked his face with one hand and sealed it with a kiss. Chapter 1433. The frog soup that had been cooking for 10 years was finally ready. Jiang Pingji naturally would not let Wei Xi go easily. Wei Xi was also a young man. He looked slender and weak, but he was a man after all. Naturally, his situation was not bad. The two of them fooled around for the whole night. It was not until the sky turned white that the activity in the bedroom gradually stopped. "It's day or rest. I want to sleep until I wake up naturally. Don't wake me up." Jiang Pingji hugged Wei Xi's neck with both hands and yawned slightly sleepily. 2 drops of physiological tears squeezed out from the corners of her eyes. "Why don't I ask someone to prepare hot water for a bath?" Jiang Pingji muttered, "We'll talk about it when I wake up. Sleep first." Like an octopus, she confined him in her arms. She closed her eyes and rested her head on his shoulder, finding a comfortable position. Wei Xi tilted his head slightly. With the faint morning light that penetrated through the paper window, he could barely see her face clearly. When he saw that her lips were slightly red and swollen, her shoulders that were exposed outside the brocade quilt were dotted with hickeys and finger marks, he suddenly blushed. Wei Xi raised his hand and pulled up the brocade quilt to cover the traces that would provoke wild and fanciful thoughts. They slept facing each other and soon fell asleep. When Jiang Pingji woke up, it was almost 1:45 in the afternoon. Wei Xi was still sound asleep. Jiang Pingji did not wake him. She reached out and grabbed the clothes that were scattered beside the bed and casually draped them over her shoulders. Perhaps because of the loud noise, Wei Xi woke up not long after. He saw the back of Jiang Pingji sitting beside the bed and dressing. "Aren't you going to sleep a little longer?" Jiang Pingji asked. Wei Xi coughed and said, "I should ask someone to prepare something. If the Lord goes out like this, I'm afraid the servants in the residence will know." He was not a person who liked to treat himself harshly. Not only was there a bathtub in the residence, but there was also a specialized bathroom. To put it bluntly, it was a relatively large hot spring pool. In winter, one could soak in the hot spring while drinking a few drinks and looking at the scenery of the courtyard outside the window. It was comfortable and enjoyable. Jiang Pingji lay lazily beside the bathtub with her eyes half closed. The steam made her skin fair and rosy. It made one's blood boil. Wei Xi wanted to wash up in the bathtub behind the screen. He had just moved half a step when she opened her eyes. There was a hint of threat in her eyes. Seeing that Wei Xi had stopped, Jiang Pingji closed her eyes lazily and muttered, "My hair is wet, it's uncomfortable." After a while, she realized that Wei Xi had brought a wooden basin filled with clean hot water. He scooped up her long hair from the water. Jiang Pingji would trim her hair regularly, but her hair was still very long. It took some time and effort to wash it. When she woke up in a daze, she found herself leaning on Wei Xi's knee. Her long hair was washed clean, and a pair of slender hands was carefully wiping her damp hair with a dry cloth. Seeing that she had woken up, Wei Xi coiled up her long hair and fixed it with a hairpin. Jiang Pingji smiled as she extended her hand and slid it from his shoulder to his neck. Her fingertips hooked onto his Adam's apple. "You've already washed my hair. Why don't you pack my bath too? This shouldn't be considered overstepping my boundaries, right?" Wei Xi, by the time the two of them were done fooling around, an hour had already passed. Jiang Pingji took the clothes off the hanger and compared them. She realized that the clothes were made according to her body shape. Zixiao is really a classic example of one who says one thing but means another. Jiang Pingji leaned on the screen and peeked at Wei Xi putting on the clothes one by one. Her gaze was filled with undisguised admiration. "What's wrong with Xi? How can there be undergarments suitable for me in your residence? There are no women in your residence. If they weren't prepared for me, were they prepared for yourself?" Jiang Pingji smiled and squinted her eyes. "If this isn't one thing, then what is? Xi is also a man. How can I not be moved by a woman I admire?" Wei Xi was silent for a while before he spoke. "Moreover, my lord often stays in the residence. I have to prepare a few sets of clothes in case of emergencies. If I can make my lord smile like this, then my preparations won't be in vain." Jiang Pingji complained, "I keep feeling that Zixiao has unlocked an incredible seal. He was much bolder than before. He didn't look so restrained. Was he ready to let go of himself?" It turned out that only Jiang Pingji could let go of herself. Wei Xi was still the same Wei Xi. A thick layer of snow hung on the short pine tree in the courtyard. Jiang Pingji sat by the window. There was a fire in the stove next to her so she didn't feel cold. Wei Xi asked the kitchen to prepare a sumptuous meal and warm wine. After eating and drinking to her heart's content, Jiang Pingji's eyes were half closed. She folded her hands behind her head. Her black hair spread out like a waterfall. I haven't been so free in a long time. Without official documents and worldly matters, I'm not used to it. How did Zixiao spend his time before he became an official? Jiang Pingji asked. If he had nothing to do, it would be boring to sit around. Don't you think so? Wei Xi said, tea, wine, music, chess, calligraphy and painting can kill time. Or I can go out to visit friends and attend banquets. Jiang Pingji said, it sounds quite rich. I don't think I've heard Zixiao play the zither. Wei Xi took a zither and burned some incense to clean his hands. He sat upright and said, what would you like to hear, my lord? You can even play some songs? Jiang Pingji asked with interest. How about a phoenix looking for a phoenix? Wei Xi's cheeks were slightly red, but he did not object. The music was lingering, charming and refreshing. Even if Jiang Pingji did not understand music, she could feel the burning emotions conveyed by the music. There's a beauty that I can't forget when I see her. Not seeing her for a day, I go crazy thinking about her. If there's such a beauty in the world, she must look like Zixiao. Jiang Pingji did not know how to play the zither, but she had a photographic memory and could recite. Not only could she recite, but she also knew how to flirt with Wei Xi. Wei Xi could not help but laugh. He chose a few ancient songs with fresh and lively rhythms. Jiang Pingji squinted her eyes for a while and suddenly remembered what was missing. She had forgotten to turn on the streaming room today. I hope there isn't an explosion over there, she muttered with a smile and casually turned on the streaming room. There isn't an explosion? That's impossible. Jiang Pingji skipped work. Various popular platforms were paralyzed again. The programmers sacrificed their bosses and colleagues to heaven one after another, but they still could not save the servers that had crashed. It was said that many programmers had secretly begun to worship Jiang Pingji. They did not ask for anything else, they only hoped that she would diligently and earnestly stream every day. Even if she had to stop streaming for a few days, she would inform them in advance. They really could not take it if she did it every few days. 5 million salted fish flooded in quickly. In a second there was no space left. All kinds of bullet screens flooded towards Jiang Pingji. Through the bullet screens, Jiang Pingji could also feel the salted fish's worry, fear and pitiful emotions. Until a certain salted fish found something fishy. Yuzitong, streamer your neck? Was it bitten by a bug? She bit her handkerchief and cried. Tell me this isn't a hickey, right? Jiang Pingji took out a bronze mirror and looked at it. She raised her eyebrows slightly, but she did not hide it. They were all adults. Straightforward people did not resort to insinuations. Chapter 1434. Lao Siji Lianming, look at the host, you look so full. I have an ominous feeling, Li Zi Luoluo. I find that the streamer's current look is very similar to the lazy look of my cat master after eating and drinking. Liang Feng Qinwen, I'm so envious that the streamer has a bound BGM. Zixiao's hands look so good when he plays the zither. Wandering Feather Shang, let me tell you guys a piece of unfortunate news. When I zoomed in on the screenshot just now, Samiran also had a strawberry on her neck. Hanyan Ningming, host, be honest. Did you bully Zixiao QAQ? Jiang Pingji waited for them to finish chattering and leisurely added another blow. Host V, what else? There was naturally a reason why he started the live broadcast so late today. The group of salted fishes suffered critical damage. Heartache, falling out of love twice in one day. The goddess that he admired and the prince charming that he liked had an affair. The salted fishes turned their grief and indignation into motivation, and a huge amount of resentment surged through the network, instantly crashing the servers that had just stabilized with great difficulty. Programmer Ape, the coder Ape and the boss who had been sacrificed to the heavens, died with everlasting regret. Jiang Pingji was about to mock him mercilessly when her private chat rang. The system notified her that she had not received an email. What did the old general send her this time? Jiang Pingji felt that she was playing the traveling frog version of the old chief because he would bring her local specialties from different places every few days. Of course, she didn't dare to let the other party know about this. Otherwise, who would buy for her in the future? This ancestor had to be worshipped. She went to the Honeycomb Express storage cabinet and found some strange medicines with strange names inside. Your Abba, I've been to a new place for the past 2 days. I'm safe now. Don't worry. I've collected some local specialties that are suitable for you. Jiang Xiaojiu, the child beside you is still young. No matter what, you are still an adult. Be more considerate. Jiang Pingji was silent for a while and asked, what are local specialties for? Your Abba. It nourishes yin in the kidneys, nourishes and strengthens yang. Jiang Pingji asked, do I need that? Your Abba, your underage boyfriend needs it. I don't trust you anymore, you beast of a man. If I don't make up for it, what if you squeeze me dry when you're in the mood one day? After all, he's just an ordinary person. What about you? Army commander? Jiang Pingji was speechless. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. She had already explained that Zixiao was an adult. Your friend, your father, is online. Jiang Pingji looked at the profile picture with the darkened name and almost exploded. Did she look like a beast who did not know how to control herself? At this moment, Salted Fish in the livestream room seemed to be sending her red bean rice emojis. Jiang Pingji was speechless. Don't use a joke that I don't understand. According to Jiang Pingji's understanding of the group of salted fish, there must be a meaning to this joke. Although there was no wedding and no announcement, there was a ring, a vows, and a honeymoon. It was rare for Jiang Pingji to be muddle-headed. She used the excuse of patrolling everywhere as an excuse to drag Wei Ci out of the house for a stroll and sightseeing. Leave on the spur of the moment and return to the fullest. In the blink of an eye, it was the 7th day of the Lunar New Year. The markets resumed their normal operations. Jiang Pingji's leisurely time had come to an end. From the first day of the Lunar New Year to the 7th day of the Lunar New Year, Qiguan Rang and the others were either visiting their relatives and friends or attending banquets. Almost no one noticed that their lord had disconnected. No, he should say that he knew, but he pretended not to know. On the first day of work, Feng Zhen leaned over to Wei Ci's side and said, "You've worked hard." Wei Ci was stunned and asked in confusion, "What?" Feng Zhen teased, "If I didn't have the courage to be filial and sacrifice myself to feed the tiger, how could I have such a long holiday? I'm so tired that my bones are stiff." "You?" Wei Ci almost lost his temper. Feng Zhen hurriedly pressed down on his shoulder and laughed. "If you don't want people to know, why don't you cover your neck?" Wei Ci gritted his teeth and said, "It's really the nature of a prodigal son." As he spoke, he couldn't help but tighten his clothes. Little did he know that there were no marks on his neck. Feng Zhen was just bluffing. Moreover, so what if there were marks on a man's body? At most, he would say that he was a romantic. However, Wei Ci was serious and couldn't help but tease him. He didn't know why the Lord liked such a dull and boring man so much. Women's thoughts were indeed hard to understand. As they spoke, Qiguan Rang walked over quietly like a cat. "The Lord has summoned us urgently." Feng Zhen and Wei Ci's expressions turned solemn. They hurriedly got up, tidied their clothes, and rushed to the meeting hall. "What happened?" Wei Ci asked casually. Qiguan Rang said expressionlessly, "The 4 factions of Nan Man have been annihilated." Wei Ci stopped in his tracks and almost lost his footing. He instinctively grabbed Qiguan Rang's arm. "What?" Qiguan Rang repeated, "There was an urgent secret letter just now. The Nanxing Alliance army defeated the 4 factions of Nan Man. The army marched straight into the heart of the 4 factions of Nan Man and captured more than 1 million captives. According to the letter, the Nanxing Alliance army discussed and decided to annihilate the entire tribe. Regardless of gender or age, not a single person was left alive. The Nanxing Alliance army is really ruthless. It took them several days to kill all the barbarians." Wei Ci felt a chill run down his spine. He said in a hoarse voice, "Nanxing, how could they make such a stupid move?" According to his calculations, there were still many years before Shui used up all his resources to annihilate the 4 factions of Nan Man in his previous life. In his previous life, he massacred more than 638,000 people from the 4 factions of Nan Man. Regardless of whether they were men, women, the elderly, children, or infants waiting to be fed, almost no one survived. In this life it was even more tragic. There were more than 1 million of them. Was the Nanxing Alliance army crazy? The 4 factions of Nan Man had extraordinary combat power. There were more than 1 million of them. How could they let the Alliance army win so easily? Qiguan Rang said, "The heavens did not grant them their wish." An extremely terrifying epidemic broke out in the territory of Nan Man. There were countless deaths and injuries. There was not even a tenth of the young fighting power left. Whether it was Qiguan Rang or Wei Ci, they did not think that this epidemic was deliberately planned by someone. The strong bodies of the Nanman tribesmen could not withstand the torment of the epidemic. At first they could still hold on, but as time went on, there were countless deaths and injuries. It was said that at its worst, more than 10,000 young men died in a day. Wei Ci asked, "Epidemic? What about the Alliance army?" When the two armies fought, the four factions of Nanman suffered. There was no reason for the Alliance army to stay out of it. The Alliance army also suffered casualties, but the situation was much better than the four factions of Nanman. Qiguan Rang said, "The four factions of Nanman were filled with miasma and the temperature was hot and humid. It was not conducive to recuperation, so the epidemic was naturally more serious. At least the Alliance army had medicinal herbs and military doctors. The illness could be controlled." Wei Ci was so shocked that his mind went blank. It was as if he had been pulled back to the scene of his previous life. More than 638,000 people died in one place. Some were buried alive and some were beheaded. It was as if the entire sky was dyed red by their blood. People were not plants and their hearts were not made of stone. One could imagine Wei Ci's feelings at that time. Feng Zhen frowned and asked, "Why did my lord summon us?" Qiguan Rang laughed coldly and asked, "The four factions of Nanman were destroyed. Can we give Nanxing a chance to breathe?" Chapter 1435. When Qiguan Rang and the other two arrived at the meeting hall, most of the people had already arrived. The three of them saluted and took their respective seats. Wei Ci was still absent-minded, his face slightly pale. Jiang Pingji frowned slightly. If there was nothing important, Wei Ci's sense of responsibility would not be distracted in an official setting. She looked around and confirmed that all her confidants were present. Jiang Pingji then cleared her throat and told them the reason for the emergency meeting. "We received an urgent secret letter from Nanxing this morning. The Alliance army of Nanxing has conquered the hinterlands of the four tribes and captured more than 1 million people. After a discussion among the Alliance's feudal lords, they unanimously agreed to massacre the barbarians of the four tribes." Jiang Pingji's gaze was calm, as if she was talking about an insignificant matter. Everyone had heard rumors before they came, but when they heard the news from Jiang Pingji, even Yang Si and the others were visibly moved. In troubled times, human lives were like grass. People would always die in war. They were mentally prepared, but to massacre 1 million people at once, Li Yun probed, 1 million strong young men? Jiang Pingji said impatiently, "The population of the four tribes of Nanman is small. After 10 years of chaos, how can there be 1 million strong young men? If there were 1 million strong young men, they would have wiped out the Alliance army of Nanxing long ago. Most of the 1 million people are elderly, women, children, and babies. Perhaps the women's fetuses are also included. The Alliance army of Nanxing is venting their hatred for the annihilation of their country. They are really ruthless." The four tribes of Nanman had been fighting for years. The depletion of the young men could not keep up with the speed of replenishment. In addition to the epidemic last year, their combat power was seriously affected. If the weather had not turned cold soon after the outbreak of the epidemic, which more or less suppressed the epidemic, more people would have died from the epidemic. In ancient times, the medical standards were poor, hygiene awareness was poor, and medical resources were lacking. Once the epidemic broke out, the casualties would be more tragic than the earthquake in Shangjing. Was it a lie to say that 9 out of 10 rooms were empty? According to Jiang Pingji's knowledge, there were a few large-scale epidemics in this era that affected a wide area. The number of deaths and injuries from each epidemic was in the millions. One must know that the entire population of Dongqing was only slightly more than 20 million. Qiguan Rang frowned and said, "Even if it's the hatred for the annihilation of the country, the method of massacring the entire tribe is really ruthless. Hundreds of years ago, wars and massacres were common, but with the passage of time, massacres were no longer common. No one would say how many people were killed during a war, but after many victories, very few people would continue to kill captives, unless they ran out of rations. Under normal circumstances, the victorious side would demote the defeated captives into slavery and sell them as human slaves or use them as cheap labor. Most of the captives mentioned above referred to soldiers who had participated in the war but had been defeated. However, the captives that the Nanxing alliance had slaughtered were mostly the elderly, the weak, women, and children. Don't say who is ruthless. In my opinion, the Nanxing alliance and the four factions of Nanman are jackals of the same tribe." Jiang Pingji snorted and said, "When the four factions of Nanman massacred the people of Nanxing, I didn't see them show any mercy. Similarly, in the early days of Nanxing's establishment, in order to prevent Nanman from rebelling, They captured hundreds of thousands of Nanman tribesmen to be forced into servitude as soldiers. More than 200,000 died of exhaustion and in battle. Nanxing also claimed to be the suzerain of the 4 tribes of Nanman. They used their powerful troops to force the other side to pay tribute. They collected 9 out of 10 taxes and sent troops to suppress them several times. They slaughtered no less than 100,000 Nanman people. This is all bad debt. In the early days of Nanxing's establishment, how many gentry relied on the blood of the 4 tribes of Nanman to enrich their own pockets? They forcibly captured them as slaves and gave them the least amount of food to do the heaviest work. They didn't treat them as humans but as beasts that could talk. Wasn't the hatred that the 4 tribes of Nanman had for Nanxing also forced out by these people? After the 4 tribes of Nanman became powerful, they destroyed Nanxing. The feudal lords of Nanxing then joined forces to counterattack Nanman until they decided to slaughter millions of people and exterminate their entire tribe. I don't mind exterminating an entire tribe, but don't use the righteous banner of revenge. Do you really think that you are so clean? Among the feudal lords of Nanxing's alliance, how many of their ancestors had enjoyed the sweetness of the blood of the 4 tribes of Nanman? Jiang Pingji felt that this group of people was also interesting. They were very good at using double standards. War was war. Murder was murder. Extermination of an entire tribe was extermination of an entire tribe. Stop finding messy excuses to whitewash peace. Those who kill should be prepared to be killed. Seeing that Jiang Pingji's words were getting more and more out of line, Qiguan Rang and Wei Ci coughed in unison. The 2 of them looked at each other from a distance and quickly looked away. Jiang Pingji rubbed her head. She had no choice but to stop talking and deal with the content vaguely. It wasn't that she was afraid. It was just that the trivial matter between Nanxing and Nanman was not the main topic of today's discussion. There was no need to waste time. Nanxing is our neighbor, and Zhangzhou is ruled by Yang Tao, the feudal lord of Nanxing. If Yang Tao is ambitious, Ji, Hu, and Hu counties will be easily lost without the protection of natural barriers. My lord has to be on guard. Yang Si stood up and changed the topic. If Nanxing is not threatened by external aggression, it will only take 3 to 5 years of recuperation to recover its strength. When that time comes, it will become a great threat. In my opinion, we need to make countermeasures as soon as possible. This wasn't taking advantage of the situation, it was taking preventive measures. Who asked Yang Tao to occupy Zhangzhou? Zhangzhou was a great hidden danger to Zhe County, Hu County, and Hu County, because there were no safe natural barriers. If Yang Tao sent his troops from Zhangzhou, it would be extremely difficult to defend these 3 places. Who would feel at ease? Unfortunately, the 3 counties were more fertile places under Jiang Pingji's rule. Hu County was a large producer of grain. Once it was lost, the loss could be said to be fatal. Anyway, Nanxing had already destroyed Nanman. If Jiang Pingji chose this time to send her troops, the world could not blame her. Jing Rong's worries are exactly what I'm worried about, Jiang Pingji said. Regarding this, do you have any opinions? Even if Jiang Pingji's god-slaying sword was already unbearably thirsty, she still had to go through the necessary procedures. War was not something that could be fought on a whim. Before fighting, she had to rack her brains to find a proper excuse. She could not possibly say, I suspect that Yang Tao will beat me in the future, so I want to strangle him now, could she? She and Yang Tao were not considered friends, but they were not enemies either. They had even worked together twice. It seemed like there was no reason for them to have a conflict. Jiang Pingji had an excuse, but she needed her subordinates to cooperate with her to dig up old scores. Feng Zhen was quick-witted and understood. An excuse to start a war? Coincidentally, there was one. Last year, when his lord dealt with Madame Tao played a suffocating trick in an attempt to incur enmity between her and Yang Tao. However, this matter was suppressed by his lord. Yang Tao was also busy with the battlefield in Nanxing, so he did not give any response. Feng Zhen's mood changed and he immediately had an idea. While Jiang Pingji was sharpening her sword, Yang Tao, who was far away in Nanxing, was completely unaware. Not only that, but he had also fallen slightly ill. After a few days he had lost a lot of weight. As Yang Tao's close friend, Yan Lin naturally knew where the root of the illness was. To put it bluntly, Yang Tao was still too kind. Chapter 1436. Yang Tao had a good foundation. After a few days of careful care, he recovered, but he still seemed to be in low spirits. At this time, the alliance held a banquet and invited Yang Tao. Unable to resist, Yang Tao had no choice but to attend. At the banquet, everyone toasted and smiled happily, as if they had finally gotten rid of a heavy burden. The 4 tribes of Nanman, which had caused the destruction of Nanxing, were finally exterminated. But Yang Tao didn't know what to eat. He didn't touch the food on the table and only took a few sips of sake. His face was pale. Yan Lin could only sigh, but he couldn't console him on this occasion. And Shui had completely turned over a new leaf. Thanks to Hua Yuan's secret plan, his forces were the most well-preserved. Even when the plague was rampant, they didn't suffer many losses. The other vassal forces suffered heavy losses and naturally didn't have the right to compete with Shui. They could only feign civility. Naturally, Shui became the leader of the alliance army. He had the greatest right to speak, becoming the alliance leader in name only. After the banquet began, he praised everyone's contributions as usual. The other vassals smiled and echoed, occasionally praising Shui. Of course, it didn't matter if they thought so or not. Shui was satisfied with everyone's reaction. The hatred and resentment that had accumulated over the years disappeared with the extermination of the 4 tribes of Nanman. Nanman was the mountain that had been weighing on his heart. Now that this mountain had been overturned, he could finally relax. Listening to the joyful songs and praises, Yang Tao's hand that was holding the wine cup tightened slightly, and a sharp glint flashed across his eyes. Yan Lin and Yang Tao grew up together and naturally knew each other's temperament. He quickly tugged at Yang Tao's sleeve, his eyes full of disapproval. Yang Tao always listened to his best friend. He could only bear with it. In anger, he raised his chin and downed the wine in the bottle. Seeing this, Yan Lin heaved a sigh of relief. He motioned for the maid to fill up Yang Tao's wine bottle. In this situation, it was better to just get Yang Tao drunk. Unexpectedly, Shui didn't have any tacit understanding. Seeing Yang Tao downing cup after cup, he smiled and raised his cup. Here I would like to propose a toast to you. If you hadn't trained your troops well and fought bravely, we wouldn't have been able to conquer Nanman so easily. Then Shui's strategist Hua Yuan also smiled and flattered him. Hearing Hua Yuan's words, Yang Tao, who had been drinking his sorrows, exploded like a firecracker. He snorted coldly and suddenly threw the golden bronze wine goblet at Hua Yuan. If Hua Yuan had not subconsciously tilted his head to avoid it, the wine goblet would have definitely smashed into his face. Everyone was startled by this turn of events. The dancers in the camp also stopped and trembled. With a clang, the wine goblet fell to the ground and made a huge noise. Hua Yuan was able to avoid the wine bottle, but the sake in the wine bottle was not so easy to avoid. Hua Yuan's wine was splashed. Yang Tao stood up angrily, gritted his teeth and said, "What qualifications do you have to mention my father? You've insulted his wisdom." The crowd was stunned again. Hua Yuan had not said anything bad about Yang Jian just now. Instead, he had praised Yang Jian for teaching his son well. Like father, like son. Why was Yang Tao so angry? Hua Yuan raised his hand to wipe the wine off his face. He stood up and bowed in apology, but Yang Tao did not appreciate it at all. Shui felt a little embarrassed, but he had to intervene. He muttered to himself, "What's wrong with Yang Tao?" Yang Tao did not give Shui any face. He mocked Hua Yuan, "I'm ashamed to be associated with animals." Shui's face turned green when he heard this. Hua Yuan was his right-hand man. What did Yang Tao mean by calling him an animal in front of him? Hua Yuan did not get angry. Instead, his lips curled into a mocking smile. Yan Lin's heart sank when he saw this. Yang Tao flicked his sleeves and left. Yan Lin followed closely behind, leaving behind a group of confused vassals. Outside the tent, a cold wind blew, cooling his burning chest a little. His anger also subsided a little. "My lord." Yan Lin stood behind him and called out softly. Yang Tao's face paled. He lowered his head and said dejectedly, "Xiaoyang, do you think I did something wrong?" "I was impulsive," Yan Lin said calmly. "You are a noble vassal. Why did you have to confront a despicable person like Hua Yuan?" Yang Tao pursed his lips and said stubbornly, "I couldn't control my anger when I heard him speak." Yan Lin asked him, "Are you happy now, my lord?" Yang Tao said, "Xiaoyang, let's rest for a few days and leave. I don't want to stay in this foul place any longer." Yan Lin sighed. "If we leave now, we will suffer great losses. War was a money-burning job. When could they make money? When could they divide the spoils of war? The 4 tribes of Nanman had destroyed Nanxing. They had looted and killed along the way. Over the years, they had looted countless treasures. If they left now, they would be giving up on the spoils that Yang Tao deserved." Yang Tao knew that he was being impulsive. He said, "But I don't want to see these people's faces anymore." Yan Lin said, "If that's the case, then you can continue to claim that you are sick. I will take care of the rest. Yan Lin couldn't blame his friend for being so stubborn. He didn't like Hua Yuan either. The alliance had conquered the 4 tribes of Nanman and captured millions of people. These were all spoils of war. They could divide them up after a while. They didn't expect Hua Yuan to stand up and make a speech, which aroused the hatred of the alliance towards Nanman. He suggested to exterminate the 4 tribes of Nanman. And Shui strongly supported it. Many of the wavering feudal lords were also won over. Only Yang Tao insisted on opposing it. Kill what? Killing the prisoners of war was one thing, but why kill the old, weak, sick and disabled? However, Yang Tao was from Dongqing. He didn't have much say in the alliance, so he couldn't stop it. If that was the case, Yang Tao wouldn't be so disgusted with Hua Yuan. Who asked Hua Yuan to do 2 heinous things? Hua Yuan ordered his men to gather the babies of Nanman, throw them to death and strangle them one by one. How much hatred and resentment did they have? The other matter was also the root cause of Yang Tao's small illness, which was also the knot in his heart. The alliance took several days to conquer the 4 tribes of Nanman and captured millions of people of all ages. Among the captives there were men and women, old and young. Other than the Nanman people, there were also tens of thousands of Nanxing women. These women were captured by the 4 tribes of Nanman to be used as captives to vent their lust and reproduce. These women suffered inhumane torture here. Those who were in better health gave birth to 1 child after another. Those who were in poor health didn't even last a month or 2. Many even died in childbirth. When the alliance arrived, many of the women were pregnant. Hearing that the alliance had arrived, they cried tears of joy. Who knew that what awaited them was another nightmare? The alliance ordered the slaughter of Nanman. The children in their wombs naturally belonged to Nanman. What should we do with them? Hua Yuan or Gulin sneered and said, "Take them down. If we can't, cut them open and take them out." There were no abortion pills in the army. Chapter 1437. Whenever I recall the scene that day, I really want to kill Hua Yuan with a single slash. Yang Tao had an open and candid personality, and it was very rare for him to truly hate someone. Hua Yuan's actions made him make an exception. Don't you think so too? Yang Tao was silent for a while, then said, "There's something I still can't figure out." Yan Lin asked, "What is it?" Yang Tao said, "The 4 factions of Nanman have committed heinous crimes. This is an undeniable fact. I can understand that Hua Yuan hates Nanman. The only thing that couldn't be understood was that, looking at his past experience, although Hua Yuan had his ups and downs, it was not to the extent of forming such a deep hatred with the southern man. How innocent were those women who were captured by the southern man. Although the babies in their wombs are of barbarian blood, the mother is from Nanxing." Yang Tao could understand if Shui insisted on slaughtering the 4 factions of Nanman. This was because Shui's parents, wife and children had all died tragically under the butcher knives of the southern barbarians. That kind of hatred was something that outsiders could not understand. In order to gather troops for revenge, Shui had suffered a lot in Dongqing. It was normal for him to want nothing more than to exterminate the southern barbarians. Where was Hua Yuan? According to Yang Tao's investigation, Hua Yuan's hatred for the South barbarians was exaggerated. It was really puzzling. Why were they abducted and raped by the 4 factions of Nanman? Yang Tao clenched his fists and gritted his teeth in anger. Isn't it because the men of Nanxing are useless and stupid? If it weren't for the royal families in action and the aristocrats, eunuchs and relatives playing for power, these women wouldn't have ended up like this. If it weren't for the fact that these people couldn't defend their country well, these women wouldn't have to suffer such inhumane torture. It wasn't easy for them to escape, but Hua Yuan and the others used the excuse that the children in their wombs were leftover evildoers to force an abortion. It's really infuriating. Even an outsider like Yang Tao couldn't stand it anymore. Taking 10,000 steps back, if the flower abyss really couldn't tolerate people of the southern barbarian bloodline, why couldn't they deal with them after they gave birth? If she forced an abortion, the child in her womb would definitely die, and the mother would not be able to survive either. The barbarians of the 4 factions of Nanman deserved to die, but how innocent were these women? Every time Yang Tao recalled the situation that day, he always felt that something was stuck in his heart, making him feel uncomfortable all over. Yan Lin said thoughtfully, "We'll leave with our troops once we're done with our business." Yang Tao nodded. He was no longer a child. He couldn't give up the spoils of war that the entire army had risked their lives for just because of one person's temper. "Xiaoyang, I'm a little worried about Xiaoyin," Yang Tao said. "Hua Yuan and Xiaoyin don't get along. Hua Yuan is so violent, I'm worried. Lu Zheng and Hua Yuan were both advisors under An Shui's command. Even if their political views differed, Hua Yuan wouldn't go so far as to kill them. Yanlin laughed. No matter what, Lu Zheng is Master Yuanjing's favorite student. You don't have to worry about him, my lord. Yang Tao mumbled, I also know that Xiaoyin is Master Yuanjing's disciple, but Hua Yuan is too strange. I'm a little worried. Come to think of it, Yang Tao had once encountered Hua Yuan's murderous intent towards Lu Zheng. If Yang Tao had not appeared at that time, who knew what Hua Yuan would have done? Yanlin smiled. If you're really worried, why don't you find a chance to remind Lu Zheng so that he can take precautions? Yang Tao said helplessly, I reminded Xiaoyin earlier, but I'm afraid Xiaoyin didn't take it to heart. This time it was Yanlin's turn to feel helpless. Yang Tao reminding Lu Zheng to be wary of Hua Yuan was seen as sowing discord in the eyes of outsiders. It would be strange if Hua Yuan would take the warning to heart. Little did they know that Lu Zheng had already fallen for Yang Tao's tricks. This matter had to start from when the alliance conquered the southern barbarians. An Shui and Hua Yuan were firm supporters of exterminating the tribe. Naturally, Lu Zheng wouldn't agree. Didn't they know that captives were considered spoils of war? The hidden value of captives was far more valuable than visible spoils of war. Why did they have to kill them all? Lu Zheng disagreed 1,000 times over. He couldn't be bothered to argue with Hua Yuan. It would be a success as long as he could convince his lord An Shui. Unfortunately, Lu Zheng tried to persuade An Shui, but An Shui still wouldn't budge. They had to be exterminated. Xiaoyin, do you know the pain of having your country destroyed and your family destroyed? There's no room for negotiation. The 4 tribes of southern barbarians are a bunch of uncivilized barbarians. Keeping them alive will only bring us great trouble. An Shui was born into an aristocratic family, so he naturally believed in bloodlines. The evil of the 4 tribes of southern barbarians was innate. If he let the captives go, they would definitely come back. It was better to eliminate them once and for all. To this day, An Shui still remembered how those barbarians had barged into his house, how they had raped his wife and daughter to death. Even his infant son, who was still in swaddling clothes, had not been able to escape. Instead, he had been thrown to the ground and trampled on by the beasts. His elderly parents had lost their dignity, thrown to the ground by the hair and dragged to their deaths. His wife, concubines and servants, none of them had been spared. The first half of An Shui's life was comfortable and happy, but when disaster struck, he would suffer. Lu Zheng's motive was profit. After weighing the pros and cons, he chose to keep the captives. An Shui knew what he was thinking. However, An Shui didn't need these benefits. He only wanted the 4 tribes of southern barbarians to pay the heaviest price for their bloody deeds. Exterminating the southern barbarians was An Shui's motivation for living. It was also an important mission that he had to complete for the rest of his life. No one could persuade him otherwise. Therefore, An Shui stood his ground and handed the extermination of the tribe to Hua Yuan. He knew that Hua Yuan was of the same mind as him. Lu Zheng was extremely disappointed. He didn't pay attention to his surroundings on his way back. Halfway there, a black shadow suddenly dragged him into a nearby tent. This person was terrifyingly strong. No matter how Lu Zheng struggled, he couldn't break free from the other party's grip. The other party covered his mouth and nose with one hand and strangled his neck with the other. The force was so strong that it seemed like it was going to break his neck. Lu Zheng struggled with all his might and finally saw the person's face. It was Hua Yuan. Realizing this, Lu Zheng struggled even more violently. He used all his strength to hook the brazier in the tent with the tip of his foot. The noise attracted the patrolling soldiers. What happened? The soldier was about to open the tent to check when Hua Yuan's angry and sinister voice shouted at the soldier to leave. Lu Zheng took the opportunity to push Hua Yuan's hand away. He rolled to the side of the tent and took out a large knife. His chest heaved violently. You. Who are you? Lu Zheng coughed twice. The lack of oxygen and suffocation made his limbs weak. His head swelled and hurt. But he didn't dare to let his guard down. Instead, he pointed the tip of his knife at Hua Yuan, afraid that this lunatic would try to kill him again in the next second. Yes, Lu Zheng was very sure that Hua Yuan had really wanted to kill him just now. Seeing this, Hua Yuan revealed a sinister and cold smile. Whether it was his expression or temperament, he was very different from the Hua Yuan that Lu Zheng knew. Could it be, this lunatic was acting up again? Chapter 1438. Hua Yuan's voice was trembling and crazed. How could he still maintain his usual calm demeanor? Lu Zheng's eyes were red from the pinching and he asked again, unwilling to give up. What kind of monster are you? You're not Hua Yuan. This was too strange. This was scarier than being possessed. Even though they knew that Hua Yuan was crazy, he had been acting normally for a long time, and no one took it seriously. They never expected that Hua Yuan would want someone's life the moment he acted up. Of course I'm not that idiot. Hua Yuan sneered. I'm Gu Lin, the son of the former Tiger General Gu Chun. Tiger General Gu Chun? Lu Zheng was stunned. He couldn't remember who this person was. He didn't know much about Nanxing. It was limited to the current feudal lords and the history of their ancestors. Gu Chun was a figure before Nanxing was destroyed. Because the cause of his death was taboo, almost no one mentioned his name. I'm warning you again, don't stop me. Otherwise, I don't mind making In Chui lose his right-hand man. Lu Zheng's eyes widened and his nerves tightened. What's so good about killing the southern man captives? Just for revenge? This person had no sense of the big picture. In reality, Gu Lin didn't have that. He didn't care about In Chui at all. To Gu Lin, who was born in a military family, In Chui was an ignorant and incompetent son of a noble family. It didn't matter to him whether In Chui lived or died. He only wanted revenge. What else? Gu Lin sneered. If it wasn't for revenge, why would I put up with you idiots? You have a grudge against the southern man? Lu Zheng didn't know about the split personality. This Gu Lin was just a figment of Hua Yuan's imagination. He thought Gu Lin's soul had possessed him. Of course there's a grudge and it's a blood feud. Gu Lin sneered. You're lucky this time. If you interfere again, I guarantee you won't even know how you die. Don't even think about getting that useless In Chui to help you. His hatred for the southern man runs deep. Lu Zheng's lips turned pale in fear. He had seen a ghost in broad daylight. After Gu Lin had left for a while, Lu Zheng finally loosened his grip on his saber. The saber fell to the ground with a clang. Among the allied forces, not everyone wanted the southern barbarians to be exterminated, but it was undeniable that they were all afraid of the potential threat of the southern barbarians. In the past, Nanman was also suppressed by Nanxing to the point where they couldn't even lift their heads. They exploited them whenever they wanted and suppressed them whenever they wanted. They were as weak as chickens. Who would have expected that after a few decades, the four factions of Nanman would engulf the entire Nanxing land with a raging fire? The gates of the imperial capital were forcibly blasted open, the royal family was slaughtered, and almost no one was left alive in the city. It didn't matter if you were a noble aristocrat or a lowly child beggar. Under the butcher's knife of the southern barbarians, only a wronged soul was left. In troubled times, everyone was wronged. Even if their rationality told them that they should keep the captives and exploit them for their labor, their emotions were more inclined towards exterminating the entire clan. After destroying the southern barbarians, they would be completely free of worries. Hua Yuan fanned the flames and In Chui's attitude was firm. Those who were on the fence also changed sides. No matter how much Lu Zheng objected, it was useless. Who would have thought that Hua Yuan, who was used to being so shameless, would actually be able to do something even more outrageous? When Lu Zheng heard that Hua Yuan didn't even spare a pregnant woman's fetus, he was completely enraged. Without another word, he picked up his sword and went to find Hua Yuan. His aggressive manner made it so that no one dared to stop him. Lu Zheng held the scabbard in his left hand and the long sword in his right. He waved away the soldiers who tried to stop him, pointed his sword at Hua Yuan and scolded, "Are you still human? All the books you've read have gone to waste. You're practically a beast. Do you understand what a beast is?" Lu Zheng didn't come from a good background. He could usually restrain himself, but once he was enraged, all manners and self-restraint were thrown aside. Those women and children are so innocent. If you want to fight a war, then fight a war. If you want to kill a pregnant woman from your own country, then kill her. I really want to kick this person's head. Hua Yuan sneered and took a step back. Gu Lin instantly switched online. They're not innocent if they're carrying a vile spawn. If you don't pull out the roots, there will be endless trouble in the future. Don't you even understand this? Lu Zheng was so angry that his eyes were bloodshot. The person in front of him didn't have the slightest intention of repenting. Who gave him the courage to say that? These women are innocent women who were captured by Nanman. They're all women of Nanxing. They've already suffered misfortune. Not only do you have no compassion, but you're also so vicious. Lu Zheng was so angry that his hand holding the sword trembled. How are you any different from a beast by doing this? Gu Lin laughed. Everyone has their own fate. Lu Zheng was completely enraged when he heard this. He raised his sword and prepared to kill. Let's see how I stab this bastard to death today. Everyone has their own fate. If that was really the case, then no one present had the right to destroy Nan Man for revenge. They should accept their fate. The crowd didn't expect that Lu Zheng was determined to kill, so they couldn't react for a while. By the time they reacted, Galin had already snatched the sword from Lu Zheng's hand with his excellent skills. Lu Zheng had martial arts skills, but he was no match for Galin. Just when he thought that his life was over, Galin, who had revealed his murderous intent, suddenly shivered. All of you leave. I'll have a good talk with this person. The crowd looked at each other. Because of Hua Yuan's power, they had no choice but to leave the tent. Lu Zheng asked him with a sneer, "What tricks do you want to play now?" Hua Yuan raised his hand to touch his chest. In front of Lu Zheng, he lifted the hem of his shirt to touch his crotch. He looked as if he had been struck by lightning. Lu Zheng was speechless. Hua Yuan said, "You may not believe it. I'm Lu Shi. I don't know how I became like this." Lu Zheng was speechless. Only a ghost would believe this. Galin is a dead man. It's possible that his soul has possessed a living person. Lu Shi is a living person and he's living well in Dongqing. Hua Yuan sighed and sat down on the mat. He said in confusion, "This isn't the first time. I woke up several times to find myself in a strange place. When I asked others, they all said that Lu Shi, the Duke of Lanting, is in Dongqing. If that's the case, who am I?" Lu Zheng looked at the person who wanted to kill him a few breaths ago, but now looked so kind. He immediately accepted his incompetence. He took a deep breath and said, "Don't pretend to be crazy." Hua Yuan sat on the mat casually, but he was not angry at Lu Zheng's offense. He smiled and said, "Every word is true. When did I pretend to be crazy? If you don't believe me, you can ask me and see if I'm Lu Shi." Lu Zheng saw that he was upright and had no intention of avoiding the question. He hesitated. Hua Yuan had lost his mind and was not clear-headed. After Lu Zheng asked a few questions and Hua Yuan answered fluently, Lu Zheng became even more uncertain. "You're Master Yuanjing's disciple after all. When I was young, I also studied in Langyi for 3 years. We're half-brothers. For the sake of our old friendship, can you tell me what happened? Why did I suddenly become a man?" Chapter 1439. Hua Yuan's endless pestering finally made Lu Zheng relent. He took out the information he wanted. He said, "Now that you mention it, it's interesting. When I'm not awake, someone else takes over my place." Lu Zheng was speechless. How was it someone else taking over his place? The so-called Lu Shi, in front of him was a dove himself. Without waiting for Lu Zheng to answer, he asked again, Are you sure that Lu Shi is in Dongqing?" Lu Zheng knew about Hua Yuan's unmentionable illness. In the past, he didn't mention it because of his illness, but now he was too lazy to hide it. "I've never heard of Lu Shi's illness. Your body is called Hua Yuan. This person has the unmentionable illness of unmentionable illness." Speaking of this, Lu Zheng revealed a somewhat malicious smile. He said, "People who are unmentionable illness are crazy. It's still up for debate who you really are." Lu Shi's expression turned solemn when he heard this. Obviously, he knew what unmentionable illness meant. Lu Zheng's words indirectly denied the meaning of his existence. "How can I not be Lu Shi? I'm indeed Lu Shi. I don't know why I've become like this." His originally calm expression became stiff and unnatural for a moment. Seeing this, Lu Zheng took a small step back and put some distance between the two of them. He was afraid that Hua Yuan would act up again. Lu Shi looked dispirited as if he was thinking about something. His eyes flickered non-stop. Lu Zheng asked him, "What tricks are you up to now?" Lu Shi's throat emitted a strange and heavy sound. He was like a trapped beast facing a desperate situation. His eyes were filled with red veins. He said word by word, "I'm Lu Shi." Lu Zheng couldn't be bothered to argue with this person. This lunatic Hua Yuan had really opened his eyes. He could put on a show in minutes without panting. "I'll never allow anyone to replace me." Every time he woke up, he was in a strange environment. He became a strange man, but others told him that Lu Shi was staying in Dongqing. How could that be possible? Someone must have secretly used sorcery to frame him. The one staying in Dongqing was the fake one. He had to find a way to regain his identity and let the world know that he was Lu Shi. Because Lu Zheng inadvertently revealed the truth, Lu Shi began to doubt himself, but his instinct to protect himself made him find a plausible excuse. Only then did his agitated emotions calm down. What Lu Zheng didn't know was that this Lu Shi in front of him was already imagining a big show. If he wanted to take back his identity, he had to stay awake and truly possess this body. He could not fall asleep from time to time and allow others to seize control. But how could this be achieved? Lu Shi thought for a moment, and a cruel sneer appeared on his lips. He had to think of a way to get rid of those outsiders who had taken over the nest. As long as he had a normal body, he would have a chance to uncover the truth. Lu Zheng had originally come to kill Hua Yuan, but after this interruption he was like a deflated balloon. He picked up the sword on the ground and left. Hua Yuan was a complete lunatic. Sooner or later he would suffer the consequences of his actions. He had been too excited just now. If he had really killed Hua Yuan, he would most likely have lost his life as well. Not worth it. Although the external threat of the Southman was gone, Nanxing did not become peaceful. Instead, it was filled with the aura of an impending storm. In the Alliance army, Shui had preserved his strength after the plague incident. Under Lu Zheng's planning and management, his strength continued to grow. On the other hand, the other feudal vassals had suffered heavy losses in the battle against the Southman. They had also lost many of their elites due to the plague. Soon they were left far behind by Shui. The difference in strength between the feudal vassals was so great that Shui was not panicking. But those who had suffered heavy losses were on tenterhooks. After the Alliance army divided up the spoils of war, they all found excuses to bring their troops home. From Shui's attitude towards the Southman captives, it was obvious that he was not a good man. Hua Yuan, who was by his side, would also do anything to achieve his goals. If Shui suddenly turned against them, none of them would be able to escape. They would be safer back at the base camp. Yang Tao also chose to leave at this time. Before they set off, Yan Lin suddenly sighed with emotion. Shui is a wolf with wild ambitions. Yang Tao grabbed the reins and turned to look at Yan Lin. Will Shui send troops to ambush us again? He won't ambush us, but it's hard to say for the others. Yan Lin said confidently, the Alliance army destroyed the Southman. All the families contributed and lost countless soldiers. They are at their weakest right now. Shui's troops are well preserved. He might not let go of this opportunity. Yang Tao was confused. What? If Shui really had such ambitions, why would he allow the families to leave with their troops? Yan Lin sighed. His friend was indeed naive. Truly naive and sweet. Don't be stupid for free. Did he even need to think about this? If Shui attacks now, the families will gather their forces to defend themselves. One family may be weak, but with the combined strength of several families, Shui will lose. Yan Lin said, if the families return with their troops, they won't be able to take care of each other. It will be easier for Shui to take them down one by one. This way, not only could he eat away at the family's strength, but he could also take back the spoils of war. Based on Yan Lin's understanding of Shui and the others, this was very likely. Yang Tao tensed up. So we have to be prepared for a sneak attack? Yan Lin shook his head and said, Shui will attack the families, but he won't attack us. Yang Tao was surprised. Why? Yan Lin said, don't forget, Dongqing still has Lu Shi eyeing us. If our strength is damaged, who will defend him against Lu Shi? Shui doesn't have a good relationship with the other feudal lords. When the plague broke out, he only warned us secretly. What does that mean? Isn't it because he's worried that our strength will be damaged and we won't be able to defend against Lu Shi's army? It's not hard to guess what he's thinking. Yang Tao was speechless. Was it really not hard to guess? Why couldn't he guess at all? Lu Shi. Yang Tao said, he's defeated all the feudal lords in Dongqing. Does he still have the energy to send troops? Yan Lin said, he has to send troops even if he doesn't have the energy. Nanxing is at a low point. If he doesn't send troops now, it will be difficult for him to do so in the future. Yang Tao was silent. Lu Shi controls Dongqing and the northern borderline. How can we defend against him? Yang Tao's family was not weak, but compared to Jiang Pingji's it was not enough. He lacked confidence. After the incident in Nanman, Yang Tao was sometimes at a loss. A general's success was built on thousands of dead bodies. It was good to win, but what if he lost? The thousands of soldiers who followed him would become piles of white bones. The land he had painstakingly managed would be invaded by the flames of war. The people who had finally settled down would become homeless again. That scene was unbearable to watch, and Yang Tao did not want to end up like that. Yan Lin was not worried. He said, let's form an alliance to defend against the enemy. An alliance? Oh. Yang Tao's eyes were filled with these words. Chapter 1440. Yang Tao hesitated for a moment, feeling a little uncertain. Will the feudal lords of Zhongzhou be willing to get involved in this mess? He didn't know much about the situation in Zhongzhou and only knew a little. After all, Nanxing and Zhongzhou were very far apart. It would take at least half a year for information to travel back and forth. Why not? Yan Lin said confidently, among the feudal lords of Zhongzhou, the Nie family is the most powerful. They occupy the most fertile states and counties. They have long become a thorn in other people's eyes. This chaotic world was like rowing a boat against the current. If one did not advance, they would be pushed back. If they did not fight, they would be waiting for death. Based on the Nie clan's current military strength, they could still choose to defend for 3 to 5 years. But what about after that? Lu Shi was full of ambition. Even if she didn't provoke her, she would still covet the meat in other people's bowls. The Nie clan offended Lu Shi in the past. Based on that person's temperament, I'm afraid he hasn't forgotten. Yan Lin was aware that the Nie family seemed to be thriving, but it was not a carefree life. If the Nie clan did not work hard to strengthen themselves, then they could only watch helplessly as the enemy grew stronger and swallowed them up. Yang Tao asked, is Lu Shi that wild? He had a good impression of Jiang Pingji. Although she was a straightforward and open-minded tomboy, she did not bite anyone she saw. Yan Lin didn't think so. When the outsiders were afraid of the northern borderline, only this person was secretly conserving his strength and building up his strength, taking advantage of the critical moment when the northern borderline's vitality was greatly weakened to launch an expedition. From this incident, it could be seen that Jiang Pingji was not only unruly, but also decisive and warlike. She would not let go of any opportunity to attack the enemy. To her, Nanxing was something she had to get. If the weak Yang Tao wanted to survive, he had no choice but to form an alliance with Zhongzhou. If she wasn't wild, how could the northern borderline have lost? Yan Lin said. She's the alpha wolf. There's no way she wouldn't be tempted by a bloody prey. If she misses this opportunity, when Nanxing recovers and Zhongzhou grows stronger, it will be difficult for her to expand again. The blood and tears of their predecessors told them that the path of multi-nation coexistence was not feasible, because human ambition was endless, and the conflict between nations was unavoidable. Only by accomplishing true unification could the world be at peace. With Jiang Pingji's temperament, it was impossible for her to satisfy Dongqing. For Jiang Pingji, this was the best opportunity to get involved in Nanxing. To the Nie family of Zhongzhou, wasn't this a good opportunity to expand their territory and get their hands on Dongqing? Right now, Yang Tao could be said to be struggling for survival. If he made good use of this opportunity, he might be the Oriole and become the final winner. Yan Lin's expression was solemn, and his brows were furrowed with worry. Yang Tao knew that his friend was under a lot of pressure, so he didn't disturb him. Yan Lin was sure that there were no ambushers, so Yang Tao wasn't worried that Shui would set up an ambush ahead. However, even though Yang Tao was relieved, the other allied forces were not. Just as Yan Lin had said, Shui was very ambitious. He took advantage of this rare opportunity to defeat all the feudal vassals one by one. Even though Lu Zheng had a conflict with Shui and had a personal grudge with Hua Yuan, he was still a person who could distinguish between public and private interests. Based on the temperament of the feudal vassals and their subordinates, LV Zheng accurately predicted the route they would take back with their troops and set up an ambush in advance. The various feudal vassals also had capable people under them. They could see Shui's ambition and knew that this trip home would not be smooth, so they had long been on guard. The first few days were peaceful. They didn't even catch a single suspicious person, let alone an ambush. In the latter half of the journey, a few feudal vassals began to let their guard down, because they were only a day or two away from their territory. They didn't expect an ambush to appear at this time and catch them off guard. That bastard Shui. He went back on his word. After marching for several days, the army was exhausted. They had finally found a place to rest for the night, but the enemy just had to choose this time to launch a sneak attack. Blessings never come in pairs and misfortunes never come alone. The speed at which the army collapsed was far faster than they had imagined. Only then did they realize that there was an enemy spy in the army. Send the letter quickly. Seeing that the army was collapsing, the feudal vassal made a prompt decision. He sent someone to deliver the news of Shui's sneak attack to his territory. It was obvious that the well-prepared enemy had a comprehensive plan to deal with it. After a night of fierce fighting, countless corpses were left behind. Their comrades who had fought side by side not long ago were either dead souls or captives. Things were far from over. According to Lu Zheng's arrangements, this group of people even stripped the captives of their armor and put it on themselves. Before the news reached the feudal vassals' territory, they used these clothes to disguise themselves as the soldiers of the feudal vassals, using this to trick the city gates. It would be best if they could trick the city gates, but if they couldn't, then they would attack by force. Relying on these methods, and Shui's army reaped great rewards, and news of victory came one after another. The same situation played out in different places. Lu Jing stood behind the scenes and controlled everything, but the successive victories didn't make him smile. What? He seemed to have been targeted by a lunatic who had lost his mind. What a surprise. Beside him, Huayuan no Lu Shi revealed a look of admiration. He said to Lu Jing, although these feudal vassals aren't very successful and don't have a large territory, they are very cunning. Some of them knew that Shui might betray them and secretly change the route of the army. Even the planted spies couldn't get this information out, but you know the route of the army like the back of your hand. If it wasn't for his ability to foresee the future, then Lu Zheng was relying on his incomparably precise judgment and analysis skills. Lu Zheng's expression changed slightly. He knew that Huayuan's problem of losing his mind was getting worse. In the past he would occasionally act like an ordinary person, but in the past 2 days he frequently called himself Lu Shi, and the duration of his behavior was also increasing. Lu Zheng didn't know if this was a good or bad thing. In any case, that savage Gulin didn't appear. It should be a good thing? When will Huayuan regain his senses? He's the Lord's right-hand man. He can't be absent at such a critical moment. Speaking of this, Lu Jing got angry. He and Huayuan were like fire and water, and this was already known to everyone. Who would have thought that once Lu Shi appeared, he would come to his place every few days, making it seem like the two were on good terms. Even Shui became suspicious. Who wouldn't be suspicious? Not long ago the two had been fighting and killing each other with swords, but now they could coexist peacefully. Outsiders couldn't help but suspect that there was something fishy going on. I'm Huayuan now, Lu Shi said with a smile. Ever since he made his decision, Lu Shi began to pay attention to those outsiders who had occupied the nest of the doves. As expected, he found some clues. What surprised him was that there were more than one dove. He had secretly devoured the weakest one, and he still had to patiently plot against the rest. Lu Jing felt a chill in his heart. He even had the illusion that this Lu Shi Huayuan before him might be even more dangerous than the Gulin Huayuan. What exactly do you want to do? Naturally, I want to take back everything that belongs to me. Lu Jing was speechless. You're seriously ill. Why don't you call the doctor over to prescribe a few doses of medicine for you? Chapter 1441. Zhongzhao Songzhou Shiba City. Cough, cough, cough. Cough spilled out from his throat. Niel Yang wanted to endure it, but a fishy smell surged up, causing him to feel nauseous. He covered his mouth with a handkerchief and coughed heavily. When he removed the handkerchief, the snow-white handkerchief was already stained with a glaring black-red blood. He was staring at the pool of blood in a daze when he heard footsteps coming from the corridor. Someone was approaching him from afar. Niel Yang subconsciously stuffed the handkerchief into his sleeve and lay back down. Come in. Niel Yang secretly wiped the remaining blood from the corner of his mouth. The maids waiting respectfully outside the room filed in and helped him wash up and change his clothes. After a simple breakfast, the maids brought up a dark medicinal concoction. The indescribable smell could be smelled from afar. Niel Yang was a person who was afraid of bitterness, but he knew he had to rely on this medicine to keep him alive. He had to pinch his nose and gulp it down. Zixuan has come to take the roll call? Niel Yang's complexion was not very good. His eyes were slightly sunken, and the dark circles under his eyes made him look very tired and listless. The maid said, Military Advisor Wei has been waiting outside since a quarter of an hour ago. In order not to disturb Master, he did not send anyone to inform you. Niel Yang and Wei Dan not only had a master-servant relationship, but they were also close friends and had a close personal relationship. Knowing that Niel Yang's situation was not good, Wei Dan wanted to pack a bed to take care of Niel Yang. Niel Yang nodded and casually found an excuse to send the maid away. After she left, Niel Yang got up and took a lamp from the side, using the flame to burn the blood-stained handkerchief. He knew his body well. It looked fine on the surface, but it was weak on the inside. He did not know how much longer he could hold on. But a cold light flashed across Niel Yang's eyes. No matter how long he could hold on, he had to make old Master Nye die. If he died, this grandfather would not fully support Niel Yang's son and would most likely hand over Niel Yang's family business to his brothers of the same generation. Niel Yang was well aware of the Nye family's situation. If Niel Yang's son could not take power, the orphan and widow would only have a dead end. "Greetings, Lord." Wei Yong sat patiently and waited for a long time before Niel Yang arrived. Niel Yang's footsteps were unsteady and he still looked sickly. "Is there a need to be so courteous between us?" Niel Yang smiled and said, "Why are you here so early today?" "I received a few secret letters yesterday. I should have handed them to you earlier, but it was already late at night. I didn't dare to disturb you from your sweet dreams, so I could only come early this morning." With that, Wei Yong handed a few letters to Niel Yang. One is from Dongqing and one is from Old Master. "Dongqing? Could it be that Lu Shi is up to something again?" As he spoke, he opened the seal with his slender fingers and took out the secret letter inside with 2 fingers. "She really is a restless woman." After reading 10 lines at a glance, Niel Yang sighed with emotion. With such a daughter in the Lu family, why would they worry about not being able to prosper? Wei Yong reminded, Lu Shi declared independence before the war with Huang Song. In other words, Lady Lu would not be able to gain any advantage from Jiang Pingji. If Lu Shi's heart was on Lady Lu's side, they would not have to worry about prosperity for the next 100 years. Lu Shi is an amazing woman, but Lady Lu's chicken nest can't keep her phoenix, Niel Yang said calmly. She's used to looking for trouble. It's only been more than a year since the war with Huang Song, and she can't help but rub her palms together and make a move on Nanxing. She's not afraid of being choked. Wei Yong was surprised. Was that the content of the secret letter? If that was the case, Nanxing's alliance won? Niel Yang said, according to the informant's report, Nanxing's alliance won a Pyrrhic victory. Is there any news from Nanxing recently? Wei Yong replied, there's a new batch of news recently. Niel Yang's throat was a little itchy, and he suppressed the urge to cough for a while. He did not want to cough up blood in front of Wei Yong. Go and bring them over. After sending Wei Yong away, Niel Yang covered his handkerchief and coughed twice. This time there was no blood on it. Not long after, Wei Yong came over with a stack of books. Niel Yang read them according to the time. Because Nanxing and Zhongzhou were far apart, news would be sent once every half a month. There was a strong lag. For example, the content in Niel Yang's hands was actually old news from more than a month ago. Based on this old news and the news from Dongqing, Niel Yang had a rough understanding of Nanxing's situation. After reading it, Niel Yang smiled and said, she really picked a good time. Nanxing is determined to win. Nanxing's military strength was empty, but Jiang Pingji had been recuperating for more than a year. Their morale was high, so there was a lot to gain from going to Nanxing. The two of them slowly walked to the great universal geographical map. Looking at the beautiful mountains and rivers on the map, Niel Yang felt a sense of desolation. Wei Yong said, Lu Shi's next target is Yang Tao. After beating up Yang Tao, it would be Shui's turn. The longer Yang Tao held out, the more time Shui would have to recuperate and recover his strength. Niel Yang said, looking at Yang Tao's family history in Nanxing, he, or the people around him, are not people who like to resign themselves to death. They most likely work hard to survive in a hopeless situation. Zixuan, guess what Yang Tao will do to revive the entire chessboard? Wei Yong pondered for a while. I'm afraid Yang Tao's family alone is no match for Lu Shi. Not to mention a year, I'm afraid they won't even last half a year. The only way out is to form an alliance. Wei Yong said, Yang Tao has just finished working with Shui. Looking at the latter's actions, he most likely won't get involved in this chaotic battle. It's possible that he'll hide behind the scenes and be the Oriole. From the looks of it, if Yang Tao wants to deal with Lu Shi, he'll most likely choose to send someone to persuade the Lord to form an alliance? After all, Jiang Pingji only had a few neighboring enemies. Niel Yang said, most likely so. Wei Yong said, if Yang Tao really sends someone over, will the Lord agree? Niel Yang sighed and said, do I still have a choice? If he allowed Lu Shi to grow, he would only be raising a mortal enemy for himself. It's better to think of a way to nip her in the bud before she fully matures. If Yang Tao sends someone over, the alliance must be agreed. Wei Yong nodded and agreed with Niel Yang's point of view. However, Wei Yong would never have guessed that Niel Yang was also making arrangements for his death. After finishing the first secret letter, Niel Yang opened the second secret letter. This was from his grandfather. There weren't many words written on the letter. It could be read in one glance. Wei Yong asked nervously, what instructions does the old master have? Niel Yang said, grandfather still doesn't agree. He says that Dalong is still too young and isn't suitable to be appointed as the successor so early. Wei Yang's face turned green when he heard this. He gritted his teeth and said, "Is the old master sincerely trying to make the Lord unhappy?" Niel Yang lowered his eyes and said, "Grandfather has been awe-inspiring all his life. If he's nearing his twilight years and his grandson seizes power and makes him a mere figurehead, he definitely won't feel comfortable." The Nie family was second to none in Zhongzhou. Their heritage wasn't something that ordinary gentry families could compare to. Chapter 1442. The Nie family situation was similar to the Su families. The Su brothers, Su Bei and Su Fei, fought to the death. It was all because the grandfather favored the youngest grandson, causing the eldest grandson and the second eldest grandson. The Nie family situation was even more complicated. Old Master Nie was healthy, and the few sons he gave birth to were well fed and drunk. Not only that, but they were also passionate about producing children and contributing valuable strength to the Nie family's population. Nie Liang's father was only the old master's fifth son. Originally, he had no possibility of inheriting the family business. Who asked the old master to control the Nie family for so many years? He refused to retire at such an old age. On one hand, he suppressed his sons, and on the other, he nurtured a few promising grandchildren. Old Master Nie had always disapproved of the eldest legitimate son's inheritance. Now that he had such an attitude, his other sons were restless. People's hearts wavered, and they began to think about things they shouldn't. At first it was just a small quarrel. Later it escalated into a plot to murder the younger generation. As the eldest legitimate son of the fifth branch, Nie Liang was also the most outstanding and dazzling descendant of the Nie family. He received much attention from the outside world. The few uncles saw that old Master Nie often praised Nie Liang and seemed to have the intention of handing over the family business to the fifth branch. Soon they could not sit still. Nie Liang was poisoned. The poison was not strong, but over the years the body would become weaker and weaker. If not for the trip to Dongqing's Zhangzhou to deal with Jiang Pingji, Wei Ren would have asked his younger brother, Wei Ci, to take his pulse. Nie Liang would have to wait for his death to find out that someone had poisoned him. The mastermind did it so covertly and even cut off all the clues. Even Nie Liang could not find the real culprit who poisoned him. However, he was sure that the culprit was definitely related to his uncles. After returning to Zhongzhou, Nie Liang purged the people around him and thought of ways to seize power. At the same time, he overtook his grandfather and took control of the Nie family. The process was naturally difficult and dangerous, but Nie Liang was very clear that if he did not do so, the Nie family would sooner or later be destroyed by his uncle's infighting. As there was too much poison in his body and Nie Liang did not meditate and recuperate, his body was deteriorating year by year. As a precaution, he planned to let his eldest son inherit the Nie family. As long as the title was established, his uncles would not dare to act rashly. However, old Master Nie still bore a grudge against Nie Liang's actions and refused to admit Nie Liang as his successor. If that was the case, once Nie Liang passed away facing a group of uncles who were like wolves and tigers, how could a young child defend himself? Wouldn't he be eaten alive by a group of uncles and his grandfather who was old but not old at heart? If there was anything Nie Liang couldn't let go of now, it would probably be his children and the Nie clan. But the guard seemed to want to say something else. Nie Liang smiled bitterly. For the sake of the Nie family, we can't let Lu Shi take over Nanxing no matter what. He knew that he didn't have long to live. If he died, the Nie family would kill each other for power and profit. In the end, Jiang Pingji would benefit from it. If Jiang Pingji was a benevolent person, Nie Liang would not be too worried. The Nie family could still rely on their family background to stand strong even if they withdrew from the fight for hegemony. What was disappointing was that not only was Jiang Pingji not kind, but she was also a person who could not tolerate sand in her eyes. If the Nie family stayed in her hands, they would be played to death sooner or later. Due to various considerations, Nie Liang could only bite the bullet and continue planning to pave the way for the family. Only by eradicating the hidden dangers would the Nie clan not be scattered in the upcoming chaotic times. If my lord insists on this, then I won't be able to object. It's just that if we send troops to Lu Shi, I'm afraid that someone will object. Nie Liang and Jiang Pingji's situations were different. Both of them came from gentry families and had rich family backgrounds. However, Jiang Pingji broke away from the shackles of the Lu family and became independent. No one could interfere with her decisions. Nie Liang controlled the Nie family and borrowed the power of the clan. He was still more or less under the control of others. Even if Nie Liang won over many loyal strategists and generals, He still couldn't get rid of the influence of his family. Nielyang said, "I'll consider this matter carefully. If someone is really stubborn and continues to block the way." He paused. His eyes carried a chill that sent chills down one's spine. If the saplings want to grow well, people will have to trim the extra branches. If the uncles of the Nye family were still so unreasonable, Nielyang might as well inflict the hardships he had suffered on them. They still wanted to fight? They would all follow him to the Yama Palace and slowly fight. Since they were all scourges alive, it was better to die peacefully. Perhaps the Nye family could turn their misfortune into fortune. Nielyang didn't want to do this if he had a choice. Wei Yong, who was at the side, didn't know that his good friend had made a shocking decision. At that moment, someone outside reported that the eldest Lang Jun had come to pay his respects. Nielyang's face relaxed a lot. Nielyang's eldest son was about to turn 20. His appearance had taken the advantages of his father and mother. He was tall and handsome and had the style of Nielyang when he was young. Behind the eldest son was a kind-looking young man who looked like the eldest son's tail. The tail was none other than the son of Nielyang's cousin. He didn't have much of a presence and had a cowardly temperament. Nielyang also didn't want his son to be alone, so he was happy to see someone of the same age that he could play with. "Father, why is your face so pale?" The eldest son paid his respects to his father and bowed to his father-in-law, Wei Yong. Nielyang said, "I was busy last night and woke up early this morning. It's normal to be pale. Don't worry, my son." The eldest son said a few more words of concern. Seeing Nielyang frown, he stood up and left. From the beginning to the end, the kind-looking nephew didn't get a word in, but he wasn't angry. Little did he know that after the two left, a cold voice rang in his ears. "Nielyang doesn't have much vitality left. He only has half a year left to live." "Half a year? But he seems to want to help his son get the throne. If he succeeds, won't my previous efforts be in vain?" The Emperor's assistance system selects the person with destiny. If you don't have a chance to succeed, will I choose you? Don't worry. "Yang, why are you in a daze?" Nielyang's eldest son stopped to wait for his cousin when he saw that his cousin didn't move. "Nothing. I'm just a little worried about uncle. Not only does he look worse than before, but he also lost a lot of weight." Nielyang's eldest son said, "You're quite close to father. The other brothers don't care about father, but it's good that they didn't say anything behind his back." It was because Nielyang was so good that he liked to help this cousin. "After a while you and I will be crowned. I wonder what character will father and the others choose." The crowning ceremony was very important for men in ancient times. Choosing a character was also a part of it. After crowning, it meant that one had become an adult. Nielyang wasn't valued by his parents because of his mediocre aptitude. He didn't even mention such an important day as the crowning ceremony. If Nielyang didn't remember, Nielyang would probably be embarrassed. Nielyang smiled. "Anything is fine. Uncle's literary talent is brilliant, not inferior to a great scholar. Are you still worried about not having a good character?" "That's true." The two of them went to the family school to study together. Nielyang's eldest son walked in front while Nielyang was always one step behind. Chapter 1443. Nielyang did not know who this self-proclaimed Emperor assistance system in his mind was. Was it a human or a ghost? Was it a god or a demon? But he knew that its origins were not simple. It saw through Nielyang's ambitions, and Nielyang needed its help to realize his ambitions. The two hit it off and worked well together. Nielyang wanted to stand out and control the Nye family. He wanted to use the Nye family to soar to the throne. However, this goal was too difficult. It would be difficult to achieve without the help of allies. "Can you really help me become an emperor?" Nielyang pondered the authenticity of these words. He looked gentle and generous. Others thought he was weak and easy to bully, but this thing saw through his ambitions. "It's true. The dragon energy on you is the richest in Zhongzhou. You will definitely become a hegemon in the future." Nielyang laughed. Although he was ambitious, he did not have much hope. The old master of the Nye family was not dead yet. His sons were still alive and kicking. They were all part of the reincarnation brigade. Who knew how many sons he had? Nielyang was only one of the 40 or 50 great-grandchildren. How could he stand out from so many people? Unless those who stood in his way were all dead. Those who survived could not compete with him. "You're so confident. I don't really believe you." Nielyang met the system when he was 9. He had been wary of it for the first few years. After spending time with it and it had helped Nielyang a lot, he slowly began to trust it. The two had worked together for more than 10 years. Yang trusted this friend more and more. As a nobody in the Nye family, Yang knew one thing. If he did not compete, he was destined to be stepped on and never be able to rise again. Since the system said that he had the true Dragon Emperor energy, his future was limitless. Why not fight for his future? If Yang wanted to rise, he first had to help the third branch of the Nye family stand out. Then, it would be much easier to deal with the others. After the system's reminder, Yang knew that his uncle Yang was a talent that could revitalize the Nye family. At the same time, he was also a stumbling block. As long as Yang was in the fifth branch, the third branch's chances of winning were slim. Yang said, "If Yang is weak and does not have long to live, will he not be an obstacle?" The system gasped. "You want to assassinate Yang?" This was his uncle. Yang smiled and said, "Didn't you tell me that Yang is a short-lived ghost and is destined to not live long? But I see that he is in good health, without any illness or disaster, which doesn't seem to match what you told me. I'm not taking his life right away, I'm just letting him follow his destiny." The system did it cleanly. It was 2 years after Yang realized that he had been poisoned and the poison had seeped into his bones. To be honest, Yang was quite afraid that Yang would find out about it. At this moment he wasn't a match for Yang at all, and once he was dragged out, his life would be over. Who knew that the system's abilities were beyond imagination? Even Yang couldn't find many clues. Yang's plan became even bolder. In order to make everyone believe that he was gentle and harmless, Yang had worn a false mask for many years, almost fooling himself. He was often bullied by his brothers, and no matter how badly he was bullied, he didn't know how to fight back and was even used as a knife. However, at the same time of disguise, he also needed to build connections, and those hedonistic sons were the easiest to fool. For example, Yang had once befriended the grandson of an elder of the Nye clan. He was an out-and-out hedonistic son of a rich family, unambitious, conceited, stupid, and easily manipulated. The thing he hated the most was that someone was better than him. What did this hedonistic son do that was out of line? Under Yang's instigation, he purposely caused trouble for a young scholar at a gathering. That young scholar didn't have any background, but he was extremely talented and didn't know how to hide his talent, boasting of his intelligence. In the end, he angered the hedonistic son, and because of his words, the hedonistic son took revenge and broke his leg. Not only that, the hedonistic son didn't let it go, and colluded with the magistrate's office to frame the young scholar with a groundless crime, and he was sent to the border for 2 years. In the end, the scholar's body was weak and couldn't take it, and he died of a cold halfway through. The young scholar died, and it was said that the scholar's mother and wife died of illness not long after, leaving only an old man and a child. He was a cold and heartless person, and Yang didn't pay attention to where the grandfather and grandson went. He only vaguely remembered that the young scholar's surname was Sun, and his name was Lai. So what if he was talented? If he wanted to fly before his wings were strong, sooner or later, he would be broken and fall to his death. Over the years, the Emperor's assistant system taught Yang a lot of tricks, and Yang also used the system to do many small tricks. All the plans were going well, but who would have thought that Yang would become the only anomaly? Yang, who had never fought for power, suddenly rose up, imprisoned old Master Nye, forcefully seized the family's power, and made a few of his uncles a figurehead. His actions were unbelievably fast, and by the time Yang reacted, the overall situation had already been settled. Yang was in power and the 5 branches rose in status. Yang's eldest son also became a phoenix, and his value doubled. This change made Yang panic, but he didn't give himself away. Instead, he pitifully won Yang's eldest son's favor. After a few years of getting along, the two of them were closer than blood brothers, and even Yang let down his guard against him. Just a little more. Yang leaned against the pavilion, and Yang's eldest son was bathed in the sunlight, holding a book and memorizing it. "What do you plan to do?" Yang said. "Yang isn't someone easy to deal with. When he was alive, I would definitely arouse his suspicions if I made too many moves. The safest way is to outlive him." According to Yang's temperament, he couldn't do anything to his uncles when he was alive, so he might take them away before he died to clear the obstacles for his son. This way it's equivalent to helping me clear my competitors. I can't beat Yang, but can't I beat Yang's son? Yang himself is full of schemes, but the son he raised is so innocent and gullible. What a pity. To tell you the truth, this is called being of the same origin. Yang glanced at it and he almost laughed. Being of the same origin? Does it mean that Niel Yang is also innocent and gullible? The system said, in a sense, Niel Yang is indeed quite gullible. His weakness is too obvious and he's also stubborn. Niel Yang was speechless. After a while he said, what you said makes sense. The system asked again, what if Niel Yang didn't drag you down with him at the last minute? Niel Yang's gaze was slightly cold. Do you know how to frame someone? Dead people don't speak. Niel Yang has to take the blame even if he doesn't want to. Niel Yang was chatting happily with the system when Niel Yang's eldest son, who was under the sun, called out. Yang, what's so interesting about this pavilion? Come to my place, the courtyard is beautiful in spring. Niel Yang said, I don't really like it. It's easy to tan. The sun isn't hot, so how can you tan? You're a man, not a lady. Why are you afraid of the dark? Chapter 1444. Yang Tao was drinking. When he heard his subordinate's report, he spat it out. Fortunately, no innocent people were involved. Cough cough cough. Are you sure? Lu Shi really used this excuse to send troops? Yang Tao coughed until tears came out. He didn't expect Jiang Pingji to be so cunning. Even the excuse for sending troops was different. Last year the Tao family rebelled. They sent imitations to Zhangzhou and Wanzhou to sow discord, trying to make the two feudal vassals bristle with anger. The result was gratifying. Yang Tao was not in Zhangzhou but at the front line in Nanxing. Jiang Pingji was clever and didn't fall for it. Her scheme was fruitless. Not only did it cost the whole family, but it also gave Jiang Pingji a ready-made excuse. She was worried that she had no reason to find trouble with Yang Tao. It's enough to send troops. They don't care what the excuse is. His wife, Yan Shuxian, sat next to Yang Tao with the baby in her arms. They enjoyed their rare time as husband and wife. Yang Tao said, I'm just surprised that Lu Shi put in so much effort to send troops. The baby in Yan Shushuan's arms pounced on Yang Tao. He smiled and took the soft little guy. He couldn't get enough of kissing him. Husband, do you think my brother's trip will be fruitful? Yan Shuxian was very worried. It was a long journey to Zhongzhou. She didn't know if her brother Yan Lin could successfully convince the feudal vassals of Zhongzhou to form an alliance. Yang Tao said, Xiaoyang never disappoints. This time is no exception. If he says he's confident, then he's confident. Although Jiang Pingji said she wanted to send troops to war, the preparatory work was very long. Yang Tao was not anxious at all. Wife, look, the child is still sucking my finger. Yang Tao was playful. Seeing the child holding his finger and sending it to his mouth, he smiled and didn't move it away. Instead, he looked at the baby with relish. Yan Shushuan's mouth twitched. She didn't expect her husband to be so childish. She quickly slapped his hand away. You're sweaty and stinky. Aren't you afraid that the child will eat something bad? Yang Tao laughed. The child doesn't dislike it. He seems to like it. He'll definitely be a great general in the future. Your brain is full of fighting and killing. Yan Shuxian said in a light tone, I don't like it. Yang Tao had lost his external brain but he still had to do his work. At most, his efficiency would be lower. Yan Lin knew that in his absence, no one could control the Lord. Therefore he chose a gentle and generous temporary brain for Yang Tao. Yang Tao was a pure and kind person. If you were to be unreasonable, he would be unreasonable. If you were to be soft, he would not be able to be fierce at all. Therefore, even though Yan Lin was gone, Yang Tao was still under the control of the temporary brain. After teasing the baby, Yang Tao went back to work. There was a pile of information about Nanxing on the table. He casually flipped through it and sighed. Xiao Yang's plans are truly flawless. And Shui's wild ambition really can't hold back. The allied army of Nanxing had completely collapsed. And Shui defeated the feudal vassals one by one, swallowing them up one by one and expanding rapidly. Everyone in Yang Tao's tent panicked when they saw this. This was a good opportunity. Why didn't the Lord jump out and snatch a piece of the pie from Shui? And Shui is ambitious. If he doesn't have Lu Zheng by his side to assist him, I'm afraid he won't be able to achieve anything great. Yang Tao muttered, it's a pity that Lu Zheng is casting pearls before swine. This Shui isn't a wise ruler. He can only share the hardships but not the joys. And Shui had hurt Lu Zheng's heart time and time again. The conflict was getting deeper and deeper. If it exploded one day, Lu Zheng would be devastated. The temporary brain said, everyone has their own fate. Yang Tao said, I don't believe in fate. On the other side, because the information was outdated, when Jiang Pingji found out that Yan Lin had secretly gone to Zhongzhou, she wasn't in a hurry to stop him. You want to fight 2 against 1 again? Jiang Pingji said, how long has Cangzhou been resting? Wei Xi laughed. The Nie family of Zhongzhou are not of one mind. It's not impossible for the Lord to fight 1 against 2. Jiang Pingji frowned. She said, if Zhongzhou gets involved? We have an abundance of troops, but our rations will be very tight. It's better to end the battle quickly. If we are delayed, the situation will be bad. At the end of the day, fighting a war is a job of burning food. Wei Xi said, why not wait for the autumn harvest? Zhongguang has made great progress in his research on fertilizers. They will be used for this year's spring plowing. Jiang Pingji said, yes, I know. Before they could say much, Jiang Pingji received a booklet. It was signed by Sun Wen. Zidao. Jiang Pingji was puzzled. Ever since Sun Wen entered her camp, apart from the battle at the northern borderline, he had been rooted in the governance and construction of the northern borderline. He usually kept a low profile. He was obsessed with Sun Wen. Other than his grandson Lan Lan and his work, he didn't care about anything else. Suddenly receiving a booklet at this time meant that there was something urgent. Wei Xi said, maybe he has a request. Jiang Pingji opened the booklet and asked, what request? After reading the booklet, she knew what Sun Wen was asking for. He wanted to apply for a job transfer. He's doing well in the northern borderline. Why does he suddenly want to apply for a transfer? Jiang Pingji was surprised. Wei Xi said, Zidao should be for the Nie family of Zhongzhou. If he hears that the Nie family wants to participate in the war, he won't be able to sit still. For Sun Wen, the Nie family was the culprit who caused his family to be ruined and killed. He had to bury his children before him. Jiang Pingji understood and said with a smile, then agreed to it. It's time to let Zidao have a peace of mind. When she was done with the matters at hand, the sky outside was already dark. Jiang Pingji turned off the streaming room on time and asked Wei Xi to accompany her for her meal. I don't think I asked you about Zidao's past? Wei Xi said, my lord, you really didn't ask. Jiang Pingji asked, did he have a grudge with the Nie family in the past? Wei Xi's expression changed instantly. He was at a loss for words. No, Zidao was an important member of the Nie family and was highly regarded. I don't know what went wrong in this life, but the Nie family actually hurt Zidao's only son. Not only did they break his leg, but they also caused him to die on the way to exile. This also caused a series of chain reactions. Sun Wen's wife passed away due to grief, and his daughter-in-law also passed away. Only the grandfather and grandson were left in the family. If Sun Wen hadn't fled to Dongqing with his grandson, Jiang Pingji wouldn't have been able to find him. This is called the butterfly effect, Jiang Pingji said. Maybe our appearance changed his fate. Wei Xi couldn't be sure. Anyway, it wasn't a bad thing for his lord. Sun Wen received permission. After completing the handover work, he immediately rushed to Xiangyang district in Wanzhou. Sun Lan saw his grandfather at home after school. He suddenly thought he was dreaming. As usual, he flew into his grandfather's arms. Unexpectedly, his grandfather, who was usually amiable, had a solemn look on his face. Grandfather? Sun Lan looked puzzled. He took the initiative to hold his grandfather's hand and found that his fingers were trembling. Lan Lan. Sun Wen said, do you miss grandmother, father, and mother? Sun Lan hung his head and said, I do, but I can't because grandfather will be even more upset. Sun Wen said, soon grandfather will personally behead the enemy who killed them. He will peel off the skin and light the sky lantern with daylily. Chapter 1445. Peeling daylily? Lighting the sky lantern? Sun Wen's voice was not loud, but the murderous intent in his words pierced through the eardrums. Sun Lan could not help but tremble. Grandpa. He revealed a somewhat fearful expression. He was too unfamiliar with this sinister and sharp grandfather. Sun Wen restrained his aura and sighed softly as he stroked his grandson's long hair. This child had not yet reached adulthood. He could not be at ease. Sun Lan said nervously, Grandpa, didn't you say that the enemy is from the Nie family? The Nie family? Grandpa, don't mess around. You're my only relative. Grandpa and grandson had depended on each other for so many years. Compared to revenge, Sun Lan hoped that his grandfather could live to a ripe old age. This was more important than anything else. Lan Lan, you're not a child anymore. You're a young man now. Sun Wen said earnestly, if there weren't any major changes in the family, your father and mother would have found a wife for you and arranged a marriage. When the wife reaches marriageable age, you'll be crowned an adult. Sun Lan blushed. He really did not think that much. Grandpa knows that you're kind. Possible, what's wrong with being simple? But birth, old age, sickness and death, no matter if you're a noble or a commoner, no one can escape this ending. Grandpa doesn't know how long these old bones of mine can accompany you and help you. When Grandpa is gone, what will happen to Grandpa's Lan Lan? You have to know what kind of world this is. It's a chaotic world now. The feudal lords are fighting with each other and the common people are ants. It's true that the Lord is powerful, but the world is unpredictable. Who can predict what the future will be like? How can Grandpa be at ease? Grandpa, don't say that. You'll definitely live to a ripe old age. Sun Lan said with a smile, I won't let you down. Sun Wen laughed. Grandpa also wants to live to a ripe old age. Not only do I want to see Lan Lan get married, but I also want to see you have a group of children. Sun Lan had been well-fed and well-nourished all these years. He was at the age of growing taller, and the baby fat on his face had gradually disappeared, adding some youthfulness to his appearance. In time he would become the dream man of many girls in the boudoir. Then the Nye family. Sun Lan's pair of black grape-like eyes were filled with anticipation. Sun Wen said bluntly, Our Lord intends to mobilize troops against Nanxing's Yang Tao. Yang Tao has sent people to seek an alliance with Zhongzhao's Nye family. Grandfather has rested long enough in the northern state these past few years. Even his bones have gotten lazy. It's time for him to come out and stretch his muscles, lest others look down on him. Sun Lan said, Who dares to look down on Grandpa? Besides, it's so hard to go to war and Grandpa is getting old. Just the long march alone was torturous enough for an old man who was approaching his 50s to follow the army. Sun Lan could be considered as the first batch of students of the Golden Scale Academy. Currently, the content of her studies was getting more and more difficult and more practical. The teachers of the academy often offered military and political courses. Military cases from ancient times to the present were picked out one by one and used as teaching materials to discuss and learn with the students. Sun Lan studied very hard and her grades were basically in the top 10. Occasionally, Sun Wen would talk to him about the situation in the outside world. He understood what he meant and had his own thoughts. There will definitely be a battle between the Nye family and the Lord. Grandfather won't be able to sit still when his enemies come knocking on his door. The old man was old, but he was not so old that he could not move. The reason why I volunteered to be transferred back was not only to avenge your grandmother and parents, but also for you. Sun Lan said dejectedly, Grandfather dotes on me and always plans for me, but I also hope that Grandfather can. Sun Wen felt that he did not make himself clear enough and explained, Grandfather sees that you are close to the eldest daughter of Qiguan Wenjing. Qiguan Rang is the Lord's confidant, and you lost your pride when you were young, so your status is much lower than his. Since ancient times, marriage is about matching families. If Grandfather doesn't fight for you, do you want to rely on yourself? When you work hard to climb up, Qiguan Jinghui's daughter can even call you uncle. Sun Lan's face turned red as if he had applied a thick layer of rouge. Sun Wen looked at him and said with a smile, Tell Grandfather honestly, do you like Qiguan Wenjing's daughter? Sun Lan was extremely shy, and he timidly moved closer to his grandfather's ear and whispered, I like her. She's very pretty and she's a good person. Sun Wen took the opportunity to say, If you like her, not only will Grandfather have to work hard for you, but you have to work hard too. Sun Lan said innocently, Isn't it all about fate? There was a saying in the books that a marriage of 1,000 miles was linked by a single thread. Wouldn't they be able to tie the knot if they liked each other? The corner of Sun Wen's mouth twitched. His grandson was more innocent than he thought. Fate? Even if your fate with Qiguan Jinghui is as thick as your thigh, do you believe that Qiguan Rang will take a knife and chop your fate into pieces if you are not worthy of her? Which father would be willing to hand over his beautiful daughter to a son-in-law who is inferior in every aspect? Qiguan Rang did not easily offend people, but when it came to his daughter's marriage, this person was as difficult to deal with as a hedgehog. If Sun Lan did not have a bit of ability, he would not be able to surpass Qiguan Rang. Sun Wen had been too low-key these years. Even though he had made great achievements in governing Bay State, northern borderline, his sense of existence was not as good as a few young people who were active in the front lines. He had tried to sound out Qiguan Rang, but the other party did not say anything and only responded with a cold snort. Sun Wen had an idea. Sun Lan tugged at his sleeves and said pitifully, I'm not that bad. Sun Wen said, Of course I'm not bad, but I'm still far from Qiguan Wenjing's standards. You won't give in so easily. If they got married in the future and Sun Lan still had such a soft temperament, it would be strange if Qiguanrang would treat him well. If Sun Lan did not fancy Qiguan Jinghui, Sun Wen would not have worked so hard. If he worked harder now, he would be less difficult when he proposed to Qiguanrang in the future. Sun Lan was speechless. He felt a little hopeless. After a while, Sun Wen asked him, Lan, do you want to follow Grandpa and train with the army? Military life was the best way to hone people. He did not expect Sun Lan's temperament to change drastically, but at least he could be more resolute. Sun Lan pointed at herself in surprise. Can I do it? He was still a student of the Golden Scale Academy. Would the headmaster let him go? Sun Wen said, It's naturally possible for grandfather to beg the Lord. But when we get to the army camp, Grandpa won't be able to take care of you at all times. The army camp is not like home. You have to be mentally prepared for whatever difficulties you might encounter and suffer. Don't complain about being tired. Sun Lan shook his head and said, I'm not afraid of suffering. After the conversation between grandfather and grandson, Sun Lan could not sleep that night. The next day he went to the academy and could not help but tell Qiguan Jinghui everything. Of course, he did not say that he liked her or that Grandpa wanted her to be the Sun family's granddaughter-in-law. He only said that he was going to follow the army for the sake of training. Qiguan Jinghui said, Why do you suddenly want to go to the army camp? Sun Lan said embarrassedly, Maybe Grandpa thinks that I'm too soft and can't stand up. It's good to go to the army camp and see the world. Qiguan Jinghui asked him, What about the academy's curriculum? Chapter 1446. Qiguan Jinghui said, Marching to war is not child's play. You have to go through all kinds of barren hills and unruly rivers. Can your body handle it? Sun Lan's equestrian archery was not very good. His level was below average and his physique was also weak. Marching to war could really kill people. Grandpa sent me to the military camp to gain experience. Most of the time I will be a clerk and help out. He won't let me carry a sword to the battlefield to kill the enemy. It's not that dangerous. Sun Lan smiled shyly. There is still a long time before the war. I will find a martial arts master to learn more. Qiguan Jinghui smiled. There is no need to be so troublesome. I can practice with you. The Golden Scale Academy was divided into male and female classes. The morning classes were the same, but the afternoon classes were different. The boys learned equestrian archery, while the girls learned physical training and needlework. Generally, the former was emphasized. The needlework level only needed to be at the level of showing a purse. As for physical training, many people's understanding was superficial. They all thought that it was a dance that was mainly for watching and training. Sun Lan was no exception. In the end, Sun Lan's sword was knocked out of his hand for the 10th time. The pain made his eyes red. Qiguan Jinghui's sword was not only powerful, flexible, and fast. Before he could blink, the sword was already close. Not only that, he also found that the other party's strength was terrifying. It completely subverted his inherent impression of a little girl. But Jinghui looked so delicate and small, maybe Grandpa was right. Very painful? Look at you, your eyes are already watering. She put down the wooden sword and went forward to grab his hand. Qiguan Jinghui carefully examined his red palm. She felt a little guilty. She practiced too much with her classmates and the female soldiers and martial arts masters. She forgot to be careful. Sun Lan shyly withdrew his hand and unnaturally covered the area between his thumb and index finger with his sleeve. The skin that was touched by her was hot. No, I didn't sleep well last night. I'm a little sleepy now. It's not that I want to cry because of the pain. Okay, I'll believe you. Qiguan Jinghui did not suspect anything. Coincidentally, a maid brought dinner to the two of them. Mother and two younger sisters, have you eaten? Before eating, she casually asked her mother and younger sister. The ancients did not have safe contraceptives. Qiguanrang and his wife loved children. Qiguan Jinghui gave birth to 2 more girls. Currently there was still one in her stomach. Qiguan Jinghui hoped that it would be a younger brother. This was because she had overheard the maid say that her father was middle-aged and did not have a male heir. Madame did not allow Rujuan to marry into her family, so he was under a lot of pressure. Growing up in this family, Qiguan Jinghui didn't feel the importance of having a male heir. When she learned about the customs of the outside world, she wasn't so sure. Even though her parents had a good relationship with each other and there was no conflict between them, Qiguan Jinghui still hoped to have a younger brother so that her mother's pressure would be less. Outside, there were many examples of the legal wife not being able to give birth to a son of the first wife, and the husband taking in Rujuan. She didn't want to have an eyesore between her parents. Even if she couldn't give birth to a younger brother, it didn't matter. In the future she would set up a female household to look for a husband. She definitely wouldn't tarnish her father's reputation. Little did they know, Qiguanrang hoped that his wife's child would be a princess. After all, he had made a wish for a dozen daughters. Sun Lan and Qiguan Jinghui were about the same age. As a boy, Sun Lan should be taller, but that was not the case in reality. In the past 6 months, Qiguan Jinghui had grown very quickly. When the two of them stood together, Sun Lan was still half a head shorter than her. However, the elders said that girls grew fast at this age. In another 2 years, it would be Sun Lan's turn to grow taller. He definitely wouldn't be short. Sun Lan was relieved. He didn't want to be a dwarf. After the meal and tea, Qiguan Jinghui suddenly asked, "Did Mr. Sun give you a courtesy name?" Sun Lan replied, "I haven't turned 20 yet. It's still too early to give me a courtesy name." Because of the ways of the world, many people had a courtesy name without being crowned. Sun Lan was still too young, so Sun Wen hadn't given him a name yet. Why did Jinghui suddenly ask about this? A few days ago I heard Changxing call him Brother Rongli. After asking, I found out that it was a courtesy name given by Elder Fengyi. Fengyi, courtesy name Rongli? Sun Lan was looking forward to it. What courtesy name would his grandfather give him? He was deep in thought when Jinghui said, "Last night I heard father and mother talking. It seems that Fengyi is going to be engaged to Changxing." Sun Lan was supporting his chin with his hand. When he heard this, he almost slipped. Engaged? How old is Changxing? Fengyi was a little older than Sun Lan. It was normal for him to be engaged, but his partner was too young. The two families are happy to see it happen. There's nothing bad about it. Engagement isn't marriage. At least it has to wait until Changxing reaches the age of 15. By then, Fengyi will be an adult. Qiguan Jinghui was not surprised. After all, Fengyi had a good reputation. A group of elders also thought highly of him. Even Feng Jin couldn't find fault with him. The two families should be engaged first. If there were any changes in the process, it wouldn't be a big deal to cancel the engagement. Sun Lan said embarrassedly, "I just think it's too early." Jinghui said, "It's most likely true. Didn't you notice that Changxing's name on her nameplate has changed?" Sun Lan naturally didn't notice. Changxing's original nameplate was Feng Changxing, but now it was changed to Feng Yu. Changxing was used as a courtesy name. If the two families wanted to be engaged, although the process was not as complicated as marriage, it still required the names of both the man and the woman. The next day he went to the academy to ask Fengyi and got a positive answer from him. Sun Lan was speechless. In a moment of carelessness, Fengyi actually quit the singles alliance. Why so sudden? Sun Lan hadn't heard anything about it before. Even though there were signs, Feng Jin had never relented. Feng Yi said, "Changxing stayed at the Feng family for a while at the beginning of the year. You know that people often visit their relatives and friends at the beginning of the year. The Feng family is also a big family, so naturally someone has their eyes on Changxing. It's said that he's the grandson of an elder who married out. He's of noble birth and has frequent contacts with the Feng family. Because the elders of the two families had a complicated relationship, Feng Jin couldn't reject them outright, so he could only ask for help. In the end, Feng Yi got a bargain. Feng Jin and Feng Zhen already had a verbal agreement. Now that they were engaged, it was just a written agreement. In the afternoon, Feng Yi found out that Sun Lan might be going with the army for training. He looked thoughtful. As soon as he got home, Feng Yi told his father about his plan. Feng Zhen said, "You want to go to the battlefield when you're not even fully grown?" Feng Yi said, "No matter how much you read, you won't be the next Zhao Kuo if you don't put it into practice. Why do you suddenly have this idea? You've been provoked by Sun Wen's grandson, so you insist on competing? Did he really think that it was so easy to survive in the army?" Feng Yi's eyes were calm, but Feng Zhen felt that his son was rolling his eyes in his heart. Sun Lan has Sun Lan's strong points. I have no intention of competing with her. Feng Yi just felt that what he learned in the academy was enough for now. As to how to use it flexibly, he still needed to put it into practice. What was written in the books and reality were always different. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.